Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is December 28th, 2022. We're live streaming right now, and I am just so amazingly excited to have with us today Mark Schultz. You know, it's not every day that an Olympic gold medalist and world champion reaches out to you to say, hey, can I, should we do a Mormon Stories podcast episode? And maybe I invited Mark, but that's not the point. If you don't know about Mark, you really should. Mark was a three-time NCAA wrestling championship at, I believe, the University of Oklahoma. He won an Olympic gold medal in wrestling in 1984. In 1985 and 87, I believe, he was a world champion wrestler. I think he was in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most world or Olympic titles by a U.S. wrestler. He can correct me if I've got that wrong. He has a New York Times best-selling memoir called Foxcatcher: The True Story of My Brother's Murder, John DuPont's Madness, and the Quest for Olympic Gold, which was published in 2014. He actually had a movie made about him called Foxcatcher, which he's not a big fan of, but it's starring Steve Carell, Channing Tatum, and Mark Ruffalo. Like, that's kind of a big deal. I never saw that movie, but what I did see was the 30 for 30 ESPN documentary called The Prince of Pennsylvania, which wasn't, totally about Mark, but it does talk about Mark in that documentary. But then also, he fought in UFC 9, Ultimate Fighting Championship 9. I think it was in Detroit, but he actually won. So, I mean, I think he was the first Olympic gold medalist wrestler to compete in a UFC event and win it. But that whole experience is covered this month in a really cool 30-minute documentary called Wrestling Demons: Mark Schultz's Ultimate Victory and it's on UFCFlightpass.com. And I really enjoyed it. And then also he's got his own business called Mark Schultz Grappling, where he teaches self-defense in Medford, Oregon. And then he's also a public speaker, where corporate folks and others invite him on to speak. So, I mean, it would be hard to find a more interesting person with more cool experiences to interview on Mormon Stories Podcast. But what does this have to do with Mormonism? Well, it turns out that Mark Schultz joined the Mormon Church in 1991 after he became an assistant coach, wrestling coach at Brigham Young University. He went on to be a head coach, I believe, of wrestling for BYU, and he was a head coach for them up until, I think, around 2000 or so. Again, his brother was killed by multimillionaire John DuPont, and but Mark, just a few months ago, as I understand it, lost his testimony in Mormonism. So basically, he was a John DeLynn hating Orthodox Mormon for many years, maybe a couple decades. And then just recently, he started studying Doctrine and Covenants 132, learned about Joseph Smith's polygamy, and resigned from the Mormon Church. Now, I probably got all sorts of details wrong, but without any further ado, Mark Schultz, welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast.
You didn't get anything wrong.
Oh, wow. Okay, I lucked out.
That was great.
Well, thanks for joining us, Mark. So I just really want to tell your Mormon story, but your story begins earlier than that. So I guess before we begin, is there anything you want to say, kind of set your intentions? Because some people just basically say that if you tell your story on Mormon Stories Podcast, you must hate the church and want to destroy it and, hate everything about Mormonism. Is there anything you want to start out with just to kind of say what your intentions are for telling your story?
Yeah, I don't want to bash anybody in the church. I have a lot of Mormon friends. I'm still, best friends with the head coach. That was the head coach that hired me at BYU, and I love my wrestlers, and I love the people of the Mormon people. I think they're a great group of people. I I just did the research. I found out how the church and the religion started, and I I I don't I don't believe it, and I took my name off the records, and but I actually do believe in God. I believe that I was led to BYU for a purpose, and some of that purpose can be seen in that documentary that was just released 4 days ago called Wrestling Demons. It's on UFC Fight Pass. And I don't believe that uh, that story would have come true had I not gone to BYU and met the people that I did. And they're great people. I met Pedro Sauer. I met Dave Beneteau. I met Ben Ojai, Alan Albright, Hickson Gracie, uh, Chael Sonnen, and none of that would have happened without BYU. But I can't believe in a religion if it's fiction. And now I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to. There's some people I think that are better off living in a fantasy world where they come from like really traumatic backgrounds or broken homes or something, and you know they they join the church, or they've been raised in the church for years. They have all their kids are members and stuff, and to leave the church would be so traumatizing. I think there's just some people that are better off in the church. I'm the only member of my family. I and I think the reason why it was so easy for me to leave was because I never really I consumed my religion like I consume everything in moderation. So
I love it. Well, Mark, let's follow your story. And you obviously converted to the church as an adult, but I do want to talk a little bit about your upbringing, if that's okay. And let's begin with the fact that you're part Jewish. What can you tell us about your Jewish heritage, and if you had any religious upbringing at all? Let's start there.
I did not have any religious upbringing at all. And my father is 100% Ashkenazi Jew from Belarus. And my mother is from Western Europe, and she didn't bring me or my brother up in any religion at all. I didn't know whether there was a God or not. But in 1978, a miracle occurred in my life, a bona fide miracle. And I started wrestling in 1976.
Wait, Mark, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
You ever talk? So your dad's a full 100% Ashkenazi Jew. Did your dad ever tell you why he didn't raise you Jewish? Did you ever have that conversation with your dad?
That's a good question. I've never asked him that.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask him next time I see him.
Was he born in, you may have already said this, was he born in the United States?
Yes, he was bar mitzvahed when he was 13. And
okay, so he was raised Jewish,
yeah.
but something made it so he didn't raise you and your brother Jewish.
Yeah, he didn't get along with his father, who was also hardcore Jewish, and so was his mother. And everybody going back to Hungary and Belarus, Russia, and where, and yeah, he I think that's the reason why he didn't raise us that way, because he felt like he was kind of forced into it. I think he screwed up at his own bar mitzvah or something. He couldn't forgot the words or something, and I think it kind of turned him off.
Yeah.
Huh?
Oh.
An echo.
Oh, let me fix that. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'll be interested to follow up with you to learn if there's any more to that story about your dad.
I might join the Jewish religion.
You might now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there in the timeline. So you were raised.
I'm already half, right?
What's that?
I'm already halfway there.
Yeah. Okay, so you were raised, I guess, mostly in Oregon. Is that right?
No, I was raised mostly in Menlo Park and Palo Alto, California.
Okay, so like in the shadow of Stanford
Yeah,
University.
Stanford. My grandparents were both Stanford professors.
Whoa.
My grandfather was a professor of ichthyology. My grandmother was a professor of medicine. They were both doctors.
Now, was that on your dad's side? On your mom's?
No, that's my mom's side.
Okay.
My dad's side lived back in New York with the rest of the Jews, and he came all the way out here, I think, to get away from his dad because he didn't get along with him. He met my mom at Stanford. They both went to Stanford, and
Oh, wow.
so yeah, and so I coached at Stanford too, and so we lived right around Stanford. That's where I grew up.
And so, did your mom have any religious upbringing?
No.
Okay.
None.
Okay.
My grandfather was a hardcore scientist, evolutionist. He had pictures of Darwin in his library, and I don't know if they even believed in God.
Okay, so your parents were kind of secular, science-loving people, basically.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
My mother and father were both in the entertainment industry. My dad was a drama professor, and he had his improvisational comedy theater. He plays the piano. He was a screenwriter, director. He's an actor. And my mother was a costume designer for the Oregon Shakespearean Festival, and I was a child actor when I was a kid for Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's why I'm so funny.
That's why you're so funny and entertaining. I love it.
How can I cuss on your show?
Yeah. Well, we just want you to be authentic. So do whatever feels authentic.
Oh man. Okay. Good.
Mark, so you were a gymnast before you were a wrestler. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was the Northern California all-around champion for my age, 15 and 16-year-olds, when I was a sophomore in high school. And I also won the high school league championship. And they wouldn't give me my medals because I was too young, wasn't it? Anyway, that's what I did before I switched to wrestling.
Okay. And that's a bit of a different kind of sport, right? Instead of just being a solo competitor, you're basically competing against others. That's quite a switch. Why don't you tell the story about what made you switch to wrestling?
Well, I was a really good athlete, and I knew that if I got into gymnastics, that no matter what happened after that, if I switched to another sport, I was going to be able to pick that sport up pretty good, because you look at gymnasts, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to see that they're the greatest technicians athletically on earth. They can do anything. They can do breakdancing, they can do parkour better than breakdancers and parkour guys. I mean, they are the best when it comes to technique, athletic technique. However, they don't have the conditioning that it takes to win in wrestling, which is what wins in wrestling, conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was my brother I just happened to be born into the same family as the greatest high school wrestler in history, Dave Schultz. And I had no power over him. None. I mean, if he wanted to watch a channel, we were watching that channel. And so he came up to I after gymnastics gave me great athletic ability. I was doing 2.5 twisting, 1.5 backs off a 3-meter board, but it wasn't giving me the confidence I knew I needed to be happy with myself. I didn't know how to defend myself, and I didn't really know. Nobody in America really knew what the best martial art was. Everybody was just kind of grasping at straws, reading Black Belt magazine, going to watch Bruce Lee movies. And here we're watching Bruce Lee and he's kicking the crap out of 20 guys at once. And I was like, God, if I learned what he knows, I can at least beat one guy, my brother Dave. So I quit gymnastics and I started taking this Chuck Norris style karate. It's called Tang Sudo. And I took it for about 4 months. And my brother came up to visit me in Oregon for my birthday, my 16th birthday. And he said something to me really disrespectful. I don't even know what it was, but I thought, okay, I'm going to show you who the real boss of this family is with my 4 months of Tang Sudo training. So we went out in the front yard and I took a swing at him and he double legged me to the ground, got the mount, and punched my face into hamburger. And I was pretty embarrassed and I slept in the car and I just was so embarrassed. And then it occurred to me, if I could just beat up everybody on earth, I could be happy with myself, live with myself. And so after that fight with my brother, that's what got me into Tang Sudo. But after that fight with my brother, I was like, screw Tang Sudo. I'm going out for the wrestling team. So the next day I signed up for the wrestling team and I was living in Oregon at the time. And I started as a 130-pound junior and I wasn't very successful at all. I was at a losing record. I was 4-6 my first year. And then the coach kicked me off the team because I wasn't winning enough in competition. So I went and complained to the principal and the principal told the coach, look, you've created this challenge match system. Mark has won and earned his spot under the system you created, and then you kick him off the team because he's not good enough. That's not fair. And you got to put him back on the team. So he did, but because I went to the principal and complained, it destroyed the relationship between me and the coach, and I had to leave. And that's when I transferred back to Palo Alto. And over that summer, I grew 30 pounds and I started wrestling at 154 pounds the next year. And I went the entire year, the entire regular season. Our team went to 3 tournaments that year. Now, the only tournament I've ever been in was my first year at Ashland High School. I went to a 4-man tournament and I took second. And then I went to Palo Alto and out of the 3 tournaments, I broke my toe and missed the first tournament. Then I went to the Alisal tournament and I got beat my first match and I was eliminated. And then my last tournament was the Monte Vista Invitational and I took third. That was my only experience in wrestling. Then a miracle. At the end of the year, I won at the end of the regular season. They have the state qualifying championships, and it goes league, region, section, state. I won the league, which was 9 schools. Then I won the section. I mean, the region, which was 20 schools. Then I won the Central Coast section, which was 90 schools, and I beat the defending Central Coast section champion, Joe Guillory, in the finals, and I was named the outstanding wrestler. And then at state, Joe Guillory gets beat right away, and I'm like, man, these guys at state are the toughest guys. But I had studied this Eastern Indian philosopher named Jiddu Krishnamurti. Have you ever heard of him?
No, never heard of him.
Oh, this guy will completely, he changed my life. And I was just using his philosophy, I guess you could call it, to keep my head about me. And I just I lived in the present. I took everything one match at a time. And I won my first match by 1 point against some guy that was 5th in his section. My second match was against the guy that was ranked to win, seeded to win. And I was losing by a point with 10 seconds left, and I got an escape to go into overtime. And then I caught him in a couple pinning combinations in overtime, and I won. And that put me in the semifinals. And that guy took me down, rode me the whole first period. Second period, I catch him with this side roll and put him on his back and hold him there. And he's so exhausted, he can't even wrestle anymore after that. And now I'm in the finals. And the guy takes me down right away. I escape after about a minute. He takes me down again right away. I escape at the end of the round. Now it's 4-2. Second period, I reverse side roll him for 2, and now it's 4-4. Third period, all he's got to do is get an escape, and he's the state champion. And he stands up with about a minute left, and he breaks my lock, and I reached down and grabbed on his leg, and I didn't know what to do, but I knew if I let go, he was going to win. So I held on, and when my cardio recovered, I did something I had never done before. I did a back suplex with a single leg. And miracle upon miracles, he landed on his back, and I slapped in a half Nelson and cradled him for 3. And I won the state after 16 months of wrestling. I was the California state champion. And that's a very far cry from my brother, who had this incredible senior year. I mean, you couldn't find 2 more opposite types of California state champions if you tried, and we're brothers. I mean, he won the Great Plains. This was an open tournament when he was a senior in high school. He took second in Russia. He won the U.S. Open while he was in high school. He pinned his way through the state and won 12-1 in the finals at the weight above his normal weight his senior year. I mean, he had the greatest senior year in high school, and I had what I thought was the most miraculous senior year, and that actually was the catalyst, the catalyst theory for why I believe in believe in God.
Well, wait. So what made you believe in? What about that made you start believing in God?
It was a miracle. I won the state after 16 months of wrestling. I was state champion. Now I was going to go to college, and I was going to get a full ride. And it changed my whole life.
And what was it that made you attribute that success to God?
I don't know. I just seemed like it was impossible, and it happened anyway. It was a miracle.
Yeah, that does sound impossible. I agree with you. And as I just kind of didn't know a lot about your background, I just would have thought, well, you probably had a dad who was really into wrestling, and he probably raised you and your brother to be wrestling all as you're growing up. And then you probably wrestled with your brother a lot. And that's why you were both champions, because you were raised by a dad who was into wrestling, and you guys supported each other in your careers. And it sounds like that's nothing like what happened.
That's not even close. I never wrestled with my brother one time from the time I started to the time I won the state. And then because he's off at Oklahoma State wrestling his freshman year, he went 35-1 his freshman year. He took 3rd in the NCAAs his freshman year. He's named Freshman of the Year. And then he comes back from Oklahoma State, and now I'm the same weight as him, and I'm the state champion. And he'd go, "Come on, let's go work out." And I'd be like, "Nah." If I ever said, "Nah, I don't feel like it," or something, he'd say in his high-pitched, effeminate voice, "You pussy," you know. And I was like, "Okay, let's go. You're gonna die." And then we'd go, and he'd just kill me like 30-0, like every day, all summer long. And I was like, "Why is he so much better than me? I'm built better than him. We're the same weight class. What is he doing that I'm not doing?" And then at the end of the year, I started to change my tactics, and I was like, he's taking advantage of my shots. Every time I try something, he counters me and scores. So I'm not even going to try any offensive techniques. And I'm just going to block his offensive techniques. And so I did. Every time he tried something, I broke his lock. I'd back up. I became this incredible staller. And he couldn't score on me. And if I could keep him from scoring on me all practice, I knew I could keep anybody in the world from scoring on me. It helped my confidence a lot.
But that wasn't until college. Now, do I have it right that he went to Oklahoma State, but you went to University of Oklahoma? You went to different universities?
No, he went to Oklahoma State his freshman year.
Okay.
After I won the state, I went to UCLA, and he transferred from Oklahoma State to UCLA to be with me. And then we both transferred to the University of Oklahoma.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, that really is miraculous that you would transfer from being a champion gymnast to wrestling, and then in such a short amount of time win a state championship and go on to have an successful NCAA career. That's amazing. So once you started believing in God after winning that high school state championship, did you start going to church? Were you ever religious or not?
No,
Okay.
not at all. I just started believing in God. I didn't know in what form. I didn't know, I wasn't imagining that he looked like a person. It was and let me tell you, I have had so many miracles in my life. It's impossible for me to deny the existence of God. You got to be me to know what I mean. But that's true.
Yeah, well, I know that your faith is an important part, so I'm glad you're sharing it. So you have this amazing NCAA career as well, and ultimately you end up competing in the Olympics. Do you want to take us for how you get from University of Oklahoma to the Olympics?
Yeah, after we graduated from Oklahoma, we took jobs as assistant coaches at Stanford, and then we tried out for the Olympic team, and we both made it, and we both won, and we became the first brothers in history to win the same Olympics.
And what was that like? Well, first of all, do you feel like you became close to your brother during those years? You're at the same university. I guess you both go to Stanford. Did you guys become close? Were you friends? What was that like?
Yeah, we were roommates after my freshman year in college. Me and him became roommates at Oklahoma until his senior year when he got married and moved out of the dorms, and I stayed in the dorms. And we were as close as you can be. I mean, we were training partners.
Yeah.
And we were around the same size, so it was very convenient to have a brother that you could train with, and you know iron sharpens iron, and he was the best training partner I could have possibly asked for. I mean, a lot of people consider Dave the greatest technician in US history, and he really did change the whole paradigm of making wrestling a much more technical sport than it used to be. It used to be just about pure conditioning and just matches were longer, and it was you could a guy that was in great condition could beat somebody who wasn't, regardless of how good their technique was. So Dave really changed the whole paradigm of the sport, and I didn't.
Well, you did your own stuff. And you both compete kind of in different weight classes
Oh yeah.
in the NCAA and in the Olympics?
Yes. Yes. He was always one weight class below me.
Okay, so you caught up and became kind of larger in size.
Yes. I ate my way to dominance. No. That's kind of true, though. When I hit puberty, I knew, I better. I see. The good thing about me was I was a gymnast, and I knew how to do all these athletic movements. And I knew that if I could move quick like a small guy, but I was bigger, I'd have a huge advantage. So when I hit puberty, I didn't do anything to cut weight. I grew as much. I let my body grow as much as I could.
Yeah. Let me just show, I'm going to just show our viewers, that's a picture of you and your brother Dave. And yeah, you do look, you look bigger. You look, your chest looks larger. You look a little taller. And honestly, your arms, I'm not trying to be flattering, your arms seem more muscular than your brother. So yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, that's the thing that a lot of people uh, ascribe, Dave being a great technician to, because he's not really built like a wrestler. He's built like, I don't know, just a regular everyday guy. I have more of the typical wrestler build, but he is deceptively strong. His hips are incredibly strong.
Mm-hmm.
Every time he used to throw legs in on me, I used to swear it was illegal.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
a joke.
Anything else comes to mind when you see this photo?
That happened at the Olympic trials. That was right after we both made the Olympic team in '84.
But you're wearing medals already.
Yeah, but they gave us those for winning the Olympic trials.
Oh, got it. Got it. Okay. Was that a pretty happy time for you both to win?
Yes, there's no such thing as a good time when you're losing.
Yeah. I'm assuming you didn't lose a lot in your NCAA career. Is that right?
I lost my freshman year. After that, I never lost again.
Like never lost any match?
Oh no, I lost matches, but I never lost a NCAA title. I
Okay.
lost my record my freshman year was 18-8, and half of those losses came at 150 pounds. My coach wanted me to cut to 150, and I was so lean from being a gymnast, I had to dehydrate to get down that weight, and I lost 4 matches in a row because cutting weight dehydration kills your conditioning. And so I never cut weight again after that. And then my sophomore year, I was 24-3. My junior year, I was 27-2. And my senior year, I was 27-0.
Wow. 27-0, undefeated your senior year.
Yeah, I set the Oklahoma record for most wins in a single season without a
Wow.
loss.
So the 1984 Summer Olympics were in Los Angeles. I guess I think Carl Lewis, was that the year that Carl Lewis kind of
Yes.
dominated? Yeah. Anything you want to say about I mean, I guess training for the Olympics, and then what it was like particularly to compete in the 1984 Summer Olympics?
Well, it was extremely high pressure because there was a boycott that year, and
Tell our Gen Zers what that means.
okay, I think 9 Soviet bloc countries boycotted the Olympics that year because of our boycotting the 1980 Olympics, and they were getting revenge. So a lot of guys, a lot in the different weight classes on the U.S. team won gold medals that probably wouldn't have won had the entire world been there, especially the Soviet bloc countries. But other weight classes were really tough. They weren't diluted very much. And two of those weight classes were Dave's and mine. Dave still had the 1981 world champion in his weight from West Germany, and I still had the European champion from Turkey that beat all the Russians. So it was not easy for us. So it was. I knew Dave was going to win, though, and I think he was ranked to win. I came into the Olympics ranked second behind the European champion from Turkey, and yeah, but and the way the way that you weigh in, the way at the Olympics when you weigh in, uh, you get on a scale, buck naked, you reach into a bucket and you pull out an egg, and inside the egg is a number, and you open the egg up, and I drew the number 6. Well, you open the egg up, and they put all the even numbers on one side of the bracket and all the odd numbers on the other side. And so I get on there, pull out the number 6. The number 1 ranked guy in the world's right behind me. He gets on the scale, weighs in, pulls an egg out of a bucket, and it's number 8. So first match, 2 is going to wrestle 4, and 6 is going to wrestle 8. I have the gold medal match, my very first match. And this is only my second international tournament, and I am scared out of my mind. And so I go back to my hotel room, and I just stare at a wall for 2 hours, sweating, sitting, waiting for this match. And the first move of the match, he does a limp arm to a high crotch, grabs my leg. And I had seen this move by some Cuban to some guy from Paraguay or Uruguay, one of those Guay countries. And he did this double wrist lock. And I had never done it in that way before, but I felt I had no other option, and I threw it, and he landed on his head, broke his elbow, and I landed on top of him and pinned him. And then I had another match later that day, and then I'm sitting in the stands, and the loudspeakers come on and said, Mark Schultz has been disqualified from that match for excessive brutality. But because the guy that I hurt is out of the tournament with a broken arm, I could still win the gold medal as long as I kept winning, which is what I did. But I had a very tough third match with a Canadian who was just the closest match I think I've ever had in my life. But thank God, that's another miracle that makes me believe in God. Thank God I won that too. But man, it was hard. I didn't know if I could do it. It was an experience, a learning experience. That's for sure.
I would imagine that you wouldn't have broken that guy's arm on purpose, that you can't really control those types of things, right?
No, it was a freak accident.
Yeah. So here's a photo. Is that a photo of you and your brother as Olympic champions? Is that right?
Yes, that's in Olympic Grove in Palo Alto. They created a grove there next to our house, and they gave us these redwood trees to plant, and so that's what we did right there. That was like 3 days after we got back from the Olympics.
Wow. Did you have any interaction with other famous Olympians that's worth mentioning? Carl Lewis.
Yeah, I took a jacuzzi with Evander Holyfield. Boy, he got screwed in the '84 Olympics. So man, it was bad. He hit I think the New Zealander like a half a second after the bell rung, and they disqualified him. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of a big deal to win an Olympic gold medal. When you come back, I imagine, were you on the Wheaties box? Like, did you get endorsements? Did any financial compensation come as a result of winning a gold medal? What was that like? Were you in ticker tape parades? All that.
Well, met President Reagan and Nancy, and then we went on a 3-city tour afterwards. We flew to New York City and Dallas, and went into these parades and stuff. And but no sponsors were forthcoming. There was no money for our wrestlers.
I mean, it's kind of mind blowing. I'm showing a photo of you and your brother with Ronald and Nancy Reagan. It's kind of hard to imagine. Like, I don't think the rest of us would imagine that you could literally win a gold medal, meet the president of the United States and his wife, and not have it lead to to not be set for the rest of your life. I mean, that's kind of what I think the rest of us would assume happens when you win a gold medal, but that's not what happened.
No, they're wrong. That's definitely not what happened. There's no money for wrestlers. Now there is, but when I was competing, there wasn't. There was no regional training centers, no athlete resident program, no bonuses for winning gold medals. It was very difficult to compete with the professionals in the Soviet bloc countries. You had to sacrifice everything to spend all your time training.
Right. I guess do some want to diminish those gold medals because some of those Soviet bloc countries weren't competing?
Well, yes, I admit that some of the status or prestige from some of the other guys' gold medals was not as great as it would have been if the Soviet bloc countries were there. But the guy whose arm I broke, he beat all the Soviet bloc countries. He was the European champion. Russia and all the Soviets, they compete in the European championships. So, to me, it wasn't it wasn't really a letdown in status. It wasn't like I had a lower status gold medal or anything. The other guys in the other weight classes might have thought that because a lot of the other weight classes were wiped out by the boycott. But like my brother, I don't think his was definitely the toughest weight in the entire Olympics. And my weight was probably the third toughest. But the next year, my brother was also the only wrestler to win the world championships the year before the Olympics. And I was the only Olympic champion from '84 to win the '85 world championships, where all the Soviet bloc countries were there.
Oh, so, okay. Well, that kind of answers that question. Mm-hmm. And then you went on to win in '87 as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's super cool. Really quickly, talk about somebody mentioned in the comments that cutting weight. This is a comment from Nathan Peterson. Cutting weight is the worst. Do you want to talk about that? And if you had to do that and what that was like for you?
Yeah, all wrestlers have to cut weight, and it's just part of the sport. It's one of the most mentally grueling, grinding parts of the sport. And
how so? What makes it so grueling and grinding?
You ever been thirsty?
Oh, so you don't drink or eat to lose weight?
Not towards the very end. I mean, you have to cut back a lot on everything
while still training.
I tried to cut back on eliminating my food first, and then my liquids after that. And the last day of weigh-ins, the day you got to weigh in, you typically don't drink anything until after weigh-ins, and then you bulk back up as much, you rehydrate as much as you can. I didn't really cut a lot of weight. Well, my sophomore year, I think I did, but after that, I didn't. It grinds on you mentally. Wrestling is already so hard anyway, if
Yeah.
you add the grind of cutting weight on top of that, it's gonna burn you out pretty quick. So I tried not to wrestle, cut too much weight. I just figured if I trained as hard as I could, and my body would assume the optimal weight, and whatever that was, I'd just go to whatever the weight was right below that.
Got it. Okay. All right. So I guess, does it make sense to kind of transition in the story to the Foxcatchers, John DuPont kind of portion of your life? Because that idea of you not getting wealthy from your Olympic gold medal in '84, and there not being the opportunities for wrestlers in the '80s like there is now. Should we talk about how you got connected with John DuPont and the Foxcatchers outfit?
Yeah. Um, if I had had any other source of income from anywhere, I wouldn't have gone there. But he lied to get me there. He said he wasn't going to have anything to do with the Villanova program. That's the reason I went there. Well, not to join Team Foxcatcher. It was to get the job at Villanova. And he had sponsored basketball and swimming at Villanova. He's got his name on the pavilion, the John DuPont Pavilion, and the John DuPont Swimming Complex. But he has nothing to do with those sports. But when it came to wrestling, he would not leave me alone. He wouldn't leave wrestling alone. And at first, he didn't come around at all. And then he started coming in a little bit more and more. And pretty soon he's there every day, just wasting my time talking about nothing, just coming in drunk or on drugs. And just, I couldn't stand being around him. I, but I didn't have another. Looking back at it, I should have joined the military. But I grew up in the Vietnam era, and I saw people coming back that were completely screwed up. So I thought that's not an option for me either. So I was kind of trapped in a way, and I didn't really know what to do. And there just wasn't a lot of jobs out there that, their Title IX's wiping out college men's wrestling programs. And there used to be, when I was competing, there was like 400 and something programs. Now there's like only 70. It's being
For those
wiped
who
out.
don't know about Title IX, why don't you just explain that really quick and how it impacted college wrestling?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was the reason they gave me that they dropped wrestling at BYU. It's because of Title IX, but I don't believe it.
We'll get to that.
Title IX is it's a federal law. It says you cannot discriminate based on gender or religion or sexual preference or skin color. And because football is the goose that lays the golden egg and pays for all the sports in every athletic department, usually, they never can cut football. So that's 60, it might be 80 full rides and going to men. And women complain using Title IX as the reason they're complaining, saying you can't discriminate against us because we're women. So you have to give us the equivalent of 60 full rides in football to match in football. And whatever other, so what they do is they wipe out men's sports. And since wrestling doesn't have a corresponding female sport, I mean, it kind of does now a little, but it's not much. Wrestling is always usually axed like first. So that's what killed wrestling across the country. That killed so many programs across the country. That's why we only have 70 D1 programs now.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to show really quickly. There's a photo of John DuPont. You're on the right there. And who's that guy in the middle?
That's Dan Chade. I drug him around with me to be my workout partner when I went to Oklahoma, and then when I went to Villanova, I'm the godfather to his kid. He named his kid after me.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So maybe just explain what John DuPont's pitch was, what Team Foxcatcher was, what it was trying to do, and why he hired you, and you know what you did while you were there.
He didn't hire me to go to Foxcatcher. He hired me to be an assistant coach at Villanova.
Got it.
And part of the deal was that I would wrestle for Foxcatcher as my club. But the only difference between representing one club versus another is what do you write in the club affiliation blank at the tournament. And so I used to be a sun-kissed kid, but I couldn't survive financially. So I took the job at Villanova, and I agreed to wrestle for Team Foxcatcher during the freestyle season. But
I guess I don't understand what a club is or does. You know, because I'm imagining you're on his estate and there's a wrestling sort of like gym, and that there would be lots of fellow athletes and some type of coach, and you would be practicing and getting better, you know, at DuPont's mansion / headquarters kind of thing. That's how I imagine it in my mind. That's not how it was for you.
not at all. No.
Okay.
But that was kind of the way it was for my brother.
He came later. Is that right? He came later?
He came, 2 years later.
Okay.
And I had left by then. And the wrestling room that DuPont built on his estate wasn't built when I was there. And he told me that if I came to Villanova, he was going to turn this building called the Butler Annex into the next wrestling room. But when I got there, we didn't have any wrestling room, so we had to roll mats out every day, which was a real pain in the ass. And we never did get that wrestling room at Villanova, and it was just a series of lies and just promises that was never kept. And you know, plus the fact that he told me he wasn't going to even be a part of it, and here he was, right in the middle of it, you know, taking over as like the head coach or whatever. And it almost within 3 months after going to Villanova, I knew I made a big mistake, but I didn't know where to go from there. So I just bided my time waiting before I left. But yeah, it was a doomed program. They dropped the program 2 years after they started it because it was chaos. It wasn't functioning. No, he destroyed it before it had it. There was he was just kept firing people and hiring new ones and firing them. It was like, I don't know. It was like musical chairs, and the athletic director was fed up, and the president of the school was fed up, and finally DuPont just said, "We're dropping the program," and they dropped it. I finished out the '88 Olympics for Team Foxcatcher, and then I packed up my shit and got out of there.
So we'll talk later about what happened between John DuPont and your brother, but there are a lot of rumors. I mean, obviously he ends up killing your brother, and we'll talk about that in a second. But there are rumors of sexual abuse, of drug use, and of just him being unstable. And obviously you end up competing in the 1988 Olympics, but you end up, by your report, you intentionally lost because you didn't want to give John DuPont any credit or glory for in any way being associated with that win. What were the behaviors that you saw in John DuPont that made you so revulsed by him that you would intentionally throw an Olympic match because you didn't want anything any positive associations to accrue to him. Does that make sense? What behaviors were most disturbing to you in John DuPont?
Well, first of all, he was about the ugliest person I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he just had this stomach that looked like he swallowed a basketball. He had this weird orange Ronald McDonald hair, and he didn't keep it up, so he had these gray roots in the middle, and then he had food like caked on these yellow teeth, and he'd be spitting all the time when he was talking, and he just he was always drunk or on drugs, and he wouldn't shut up. And he wasn't a serious person. He was like a kid that never grew up. He just spoiled rotten his whole life. Trust fund baby, just spoiled up. And here he wants to try to associate with really tough guys like me and Dave and other wrestlers, because he's not. And it just, if you want to win, you have to associate with winners. And if you don't, if you're associating with losers, it rubs off on you. And I could not get away from this guy. And finally, I just said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. But some people talk about sex abuse and stuff, but people don't know he was a eunuch. He lost his testicles in a horse riding accident. He was a pentathlete, and he was jumping over a fence, and the horse threw him onto the fence, and he straddled it. His testicles were infected and had to be removed. So he was he had a lot of feminine characteristics, because he didn't have any testosterone in his system. And anyway, that would screw me up. If I lost my testicles, I'd probably be a drug addict and alcoholic too. But I don't give him any credit for that, because the way he acted and the way he was real arrogant, and he just had no reason to be. He just wouldn't shut up. I couldn't stand him.
Yeah, I think in the 30 for 30 documentary I saw, he got into like weapons and assault rifles and that sort of stuff. And he was doing cocaine a lot. And like, man, cocaine and automatic weapons, that those two don't mix, right?
I guess, yeah. No, they don't. He proved that.
Yeah. So
he had this huge thing of cocaine in his dresser drawer. It had the words "evidence" written on the side of the bag, and he stuck his straw in, and he took this hit. I thought he was going to go into cardiac fibrillation. And I go, "What do you want me to do if you go into cardiac fibrillation?" He goes, "Call my lawyer." I go, "You sure you don't want me to call an ambulance?" It's like, "No, call my lawyer." But it was like it didn't affect him. I think he was so like already zonked out on drugs. Nothing affected him.
So so you go on to compete in the 1988 Olympics, and you lost, and you're not a loser. I've already kind of alluded to why you lost, but do you want to talk to anything about your 1988 Olympic appearance and loss?
Well, if you go on to UFC Fight Pass, you can see they cover that issue pretty thoroughly. It's the latest episode of Fight Lore. It's called Wrestling Demons, and it's Mark Schultz. It's called Wrestling Demons: Mark Schultz's Ultimate Victory, and you can watch if you're interested in why I threw my last match. And it was against a Turkish guy, and I would have thrown it to anybody. It wouldn't have mattered what country he was from. But because I had broken the Turk's arm in the '84 Olympics, I've been told that there's a story going around Turkey that this guy that I threw the match to got revenge for the first Turkish guy. But it wouldn't have mattered who I was wrestling. I was going to throw the match and quit wrestling, walk away from wrestling because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. I couldn't deal with DuPont.
Why didn't you just not compete in the Olympics at all and just not even go?
Yeah, I shouldn't have. I should have let Mike Sheets go. I'm sure if I would have let Mike Sheets go, the guy that I beat to make the Olympic team, I'm sure he would have won a gold medal.
Yeah, because that's really saying something. You won in the Olympic trials, right? I mean, yeah. Okay, but I guess maybe you just got caught up in a repeat kind of thing, maybe.
What? I don't understand.
Do you remember when you decided to throw it versus, you know? Yeah, do you remember when you decided to throw it?
It was right before that match.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. And that's not the way I imagine you would have wanted to end your wrestling career, right?
Right. I wanted to go out a winner, but I just could not give DuPont the prestige and status of producing an Olympic champion. And he was so, God, he was just so overbearing and just always around. And I'm not used to that. I do not respond well with that kind of encroachment upon my privacy. I can't deal with it.
So what was it like for you psychologically to go out that way, to lose?
Depressing.
Yeah.
I was almost like traumatized. You know, I had to live with that by myself for all this time.
So did you kind of get to a dark place after the '88 Olympics?
Yes. Really dark. That's when I ended up going to BYU.
Yeah. So tell us how you ended up after losing the 1988 Olympics. How did you end up at BYU?
I was on a ski vacation in Park City, and I had traveled there to find the most vertical drop in the country for the money. And so I went there and I skied for about a week, and then I just felt like I needed to work out, and the only people that could work out with me were Division I college guys. And the only Division I college team in the state of Utah was BYU. So I went down there, and the first guy I met, I asked him, and I loved when I first pulled into BYU. I was so impressed. I mean, the Y Mountain in the backdrop and just this really clean campus. It was pretty impressive, and I was like, man, this would be the greatest job. If I could get the head coaching job here and run my own wrestling camps, I could make a lot of money. Turns out BYU is the only college in the country that runs all their own camps. So I never got to do that. But the when I showed up on campus, I was and there was like this, I don't know, it's like an 8-point mule deer or something walking right between the Richards building and the Smith Fieldhouse. I was like, man, this is the greatest campus in the world. And so first guy I met, I was asking him, I go, so are you Mormon? And, he's like, yeah. And I go, why'd you come here? He goes, well, he's trying to brag to me. He goes, well, actually, to tell you the truth, I came here to wrestle. I was like, really? Oh, we'll probably run into each other then. I'm Mark Schultz. And he got so embarrassed because he knew I caught him in a lie. Because he knew I wasn't going to see him in the wrestling room. So that was my first person I met on campus. And then I went to the athletic department and I got a brochure, a wrestling team brochure, because I wanted to look at who the head coach was. So I could walk up to him like I already knew who he was and stuff, but I really didn't. But I acted like I did because I read this pamphlet, you know. So when I saw him, I was like, "Hey, Alan." But me and him became really fast friends, and he's a great guy. I love him.
What was his name?
Alan Albright.
Okay. And what year did you show up on BYU campus?
That was 1991, February 91.
So I was at BYU in 1991. That's kind of fun.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I finished my mission in 1990. So I was there when you were on BYU campus. So was I.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That's fun. Yeah. I finished at BYU in 93. So we were there we overlapped. So what did you know about Mormons? You know, by the time you're showing up at BYU, what was your impression of Mormons and the Mormon church, or did you have any?
Yes, I told my wife at the time, I said, you know, be careful. These guys are all brainwashed cult members. And I had known a couple of Mormon people when I was younger that I didn't really like that much, and that was the only thing I knew about them. And you know, I shouldn't have, you know, ascribed, you know, any characteristics to anyone else other than the people that I met. But I did not have a positive view of Mormons at the time. And I really thought it was a brainwashed cult.
Well, that's kind of weird though, because I imagine with an Olympic gold medal, having competed twice in the Olympics with 3 NCAA championships, you literally could have gone to any wrestling program in the United States and got a coaching job. So like, if you add to that the fact that you thought the Mormon church was a cult, why in the heck would you choose BYU as a place to coach?
I don't know. You know, I wasn't getting any job offers. When I went out in the '88 Olympics, I kind of turned my back on wrestling. It was very painful. But because of who I was, I didn't have a lot of options for jobs and stuff. So I knew I could become a coach somewhere. But, you know, I thought, I don't know, you know, politics is kind of plays a part in it too, you know, getting a job somewhere and, you know, who you know and stuff. I don't know. I just really liked BYU. I liked the campus because it was so clean and the people were really clean, like a bunch of Ken and Barbie dolls. It's,
It's impressive.
I don't know. I just thought, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, the campus is beautiful, and that's probably one of the reasons they make it so beautiful, because it's impressive. Really quickly, one of our viewers, Coco B, asks, did you get a degree at University of Oklahoma? And if so, what was it in, or did you not graduate?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's from University of Oklahoma and a master's from BYU.
What are they in?
Exercise science.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the question, Coco B. And really quickly, all our viewers on YouTube, it would mean a lot to me if you guys would just take a minute to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That will make it so you're notified whenever a new episode comes out, so you won't miss any of our shows. But also, we're trying to reach 100,000 subscribers. That's really good for the channel and for the algorithms once you hit 100,000. So please subscribe to YouTube if you can, for you and for Mormon Stories Podcast. Okay, so you joined BYU as a never Mormon, thinking that the Mormon church might be a cult. So what was that like?
Well, I didn't really pay much attention to religion my whole life. I believed in God, but I didn't know, like, I couldn't visualize him or anything. So I start coaching. Alan Albright hires me almost right away, and uh, after over a period, and one thing he says to me, after a couple weeks, I think maybe 3 weeks, he goes, Mark, the BYU's threatening to drop wrestling, and I'm thinking of getting out. And if they don't drop it, I'll probably be gone in 3 years. And if you want, I can make it so you take over as the head coach. But I can tell you right now that they're not going to hire a non-member again, because the guy they had before Allen, got some kind of scandal or something. And so I just was like, okay. So for about 8 months after um, arriving there and getting the job there, Alan was constantly feeding me the scriptures, like, there's, these other sheep, which, not of this fold, and, the the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph. And he keeps feeding me these lines, and I, I I'm like, oh, okay. So he gave me this tape, not a cassette tape, of the Book of Mormon, because my eyesight's not that great, so I would rather listen than read. But so I'm listening to these tapes and this story about, Lehi coming to America, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, wow, this is one hell of a story. And so, but I was constantly searching for something I could hang my hat on, because I needed some kind of scientific evidence to live with myself. If I was going to join the church, I I needed to have a reason that where I felt like I could prove in my mind scientifically that this is true. And then when I found chiasmus, that became my piece of evidence, and that gave me the rationalization to get baptized. And Alan baptized me.
Okay, really quickly, for those of our listeners, we have non-Mormons. Half of our audience has never been Mormon. So is there any way you could just try to explain a little bit about chiasmus and how it relates to the Book of Mormon, and why you felt like that was evidence that would make you want to join the church? That's putting you
Yes.
on the spot.
Uh,
So,
yeah. It's a chiasmus is like a palindrome. It's like the name Hannah, Hannah. The first half is exactly the same as the second half, but in reverse order. Well, in chiasmus, instead of letters being formed in that forward backward order, there are words or ideas that are formed in that strict order. It's math, it it anyway. In my mind, when I found chiasmus in Alma 36, I was like, wow, what are the chances that Joseph made up the Book of Alma, or Alma 36, off the top of his head, and these words are ordered in this specific order? And I thought, because of that, it's beyond chance. It's beyond random chance. Therefore, he this must be it. Chiasmus is an ancient Hebrew uh, poetic device used in the memorization of long text and significant spiritual events. And it only found in ancient Hebrew literature. And when I found it in Alma 36, I convinced myself that there's no way Joseph could have made it up. Therefore, he's a real prophet. And I mean, I've defended Joseph as a real prophet up until about 3 months ago.
So yeah, so I think it was John Welch or Jack Welch who came up with this idea of chiasmus in the Book of Mormon as a
John.
proof that the Book of Mormon is an ancient document. The problem with that logic is that you can find chiasmus in like Dr. Seuss books, like it's in the Bible.
Absolutely.
And it's repetitive everywhere. But I mean, you alluded to this in a phone call we had earlier today. You kind of had some motivating factors to make you want to believe. Is that right, Mark?
Yes, I wanted the job. I'd say half the reason I joined was to get the job. I just needed some kind of scientific evidence to prove that, it was true. But then I find out, a couple months ago that there's chiasmus in Alice in Wonderland, the Late War, and the first book of Napoleon, and the View of the Hebrews. And I'm like, oh, maybe he just plagiarized it. If that would explain how it got in there.
Yeah. Yeah, but you really wanted and needed a good job, and you were captivated by the BYU campus. And I just think that kind of explains how conversion can often happen, whether it's a girl or a woman you fall in love with, whether it's a job you need, whether you're just lonely and desperate. There's this idea of confirmation bias or motivated reasoning, which is you can almost talk yourself into literally believing anything if psychologically or emotionally you want it bad enough. Is that fair to say? I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, and also due to the fact that missionaries are trained to only speak about certain things in their back when I joined, it was 6 lessons. Well, they're not even taught the history of the church, so they can't even teach that to us, to new investigators. So because the truth is omitted, there's so many omissions that I found out recently, but that's what kept me in it, was the fact that I didn't have the information and I didn't want to look for it. I just wanted to get paid, feed my family, and just live in peace.
Yeah, we always love it when Joseph Smith scholar Dan Vogel joins us, and Dan Vogel wants to remind us that Alma 36 is a very sloppy reverse parallelism. So Dan's basically saying, even as far as chiasmus goes, Joseph didn't pull it off very well. Have you heard of Dan Vogel yet?
Oh,
Mark?
I'm a huge fan of Dan's.
All right, so shout out to Dan Vogel. We love you, Dan. All right, so you joined the Mormon Church. Chiasmus helps convince you. You say that the missionaries withheld a lot of important information from you. We won't have you go into that. We'll come to that later at towards the end when we learn about your unraveling. What can you tell about what it's like to teach, to coach at an intercollegiate level at the Lord's one true university? What was that like?
It was outstanding. It
Really?
really was. Oh, it was the fucking greatest experience of my life. I loved it. I really did. But it made me happy. I mean, all the things that made BYU so great for me was the people that I met there. I recruited Chael Sonnen to come to BYU. He is one of the greatest UFC fighters. He's my favorite UFC fighter. I wouldn't have met Pedro Sauer, my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I wouldn't have met David Beneteau, the guy that I was training for UFC 9. I wouldn't have met all the wrestlers that I had. Aaron Holker, NCAA champion. When he wrestled for me, he was the first All-American in 13 years as a freshman. And then they dropped the program. He transfers to Iowa State and wins the NCAAs the next year. And I just felt really lucky to be part of that world. And I I was a staunch defender of Joseph Smith up until a couple months ago. I'd take down anybody. I even tell Joe Rogan, I'm so stupid. I was like, Joe Rogan, he makes fun of the Mormon church all the time. And I sent him a message one time after the movie came out. He wanted me on really bad, but I didn't go on that. But if I would have gone on there and like defended the Mormon church on Joe Rogan, I would have ruined my name. I thank God he didn't put me on. Anyway, that's another reason I believe in God.
So you want Joe Rogan wanted you to come on his podcast, but you wouldn't go on because he was critical of the Mormon church?
No, not at all. There was it was almost like a miracle. It was an unforeseen series of strange events took place right after he wanted me to come on, and I just couldn't get there. It was just strange. And
you view it as a miracle because you don't want that video out there of you trying to defend Mormonism to Joe Rogan. Is that what you're saying? Kind of like the Brandon Flowers. Was it Christopher Hitchens when he goes on that talk show with Christopher Hitchens and just gets dressed down? You're glad that never happened. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I look like a fool.
So
Thank you, Lord.
That's another miracle that makes you believe in God. Is that what you're saying? The fact
Absolutely. I really do. I honestly believe that occurred for a reason, the way it occurred for a reason.
So, dude, now you can go on Joe Rogan.
Now it's the time, right? The Fight Lord episode's out. I'm out of this church. It's time. Joe Rogan, call me. No.
Okay, so going back to your time at BYU, so one of the jobs I had as a BYU student was being a tutor to NCAA athletes at BYU. And one of the things I noticed there was that a lot of those athletes did not obey the honor code. One of the football players that I was tutoring lived with his girlfriend at BYU, but just kind of hid it. I know that there was a lot of partying and sex going on with the BYU athletes. And that obviously a lot of these BYU athletes were not Mormon, would never be Mormon, and were there for the athletics, not for the honor code or for the religious stuff. Do you have any stories you want to tell about trying to be competitive in the NCAA world at BYU while your athletes are in theory expected to obey the honor code?
Yeah, the honor code was the biggest stumbling block for recruiting because you have to sign an agreement, an honor code agreement saying that you're willing to stay celibate or not have sex until marriage. Well, how many kids in the world will sign an agreement like that? It's pretty rare. Only LDS kids. So I ended up with an almost an all LDS team because of that. But they were very, family oriented. I mean, I used to go to tournaments and I'd like talk to the Purdue coach and I'd be like, how many guys on your team are married? He's like, none. I'm like, are you married? No. How about your assistant coaches? No. I'm like, okay. So he goes, how many guys are married? I go, 7 of my 10 starters are married. And one of them's got 2 kids. Another one's got another kid. And I don't know how they do it.
So is being married a disadvantage to being a competitive wrestler? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know that answer to that question. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying it's different.
So how competitive were your wrestling teams at BYU? Did they do well? Did they not do well?
The first year I took over, we were like fourth in the conference, and then for like the next 3 or 4 years, we were like third, and then we our final year we beat all of the schools in our conference, but we moved into another conference, so we took second in that conference behind ninth ranked Northern Iowa, but we destroyed everybody my final year in the WAC championships.
Okay,
The WAC schools.
so you were in the WAC before the Mountain West was created, is that right?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
okay. Okay, so you definitely improved the program while you were
Oh
there.
yeah. I had an All-American wrestler athletic director, Rondo Felber.
Hmm.
He's the one that told me he was dropping wrestling. Can you believe that?
Oh, that BYU was dropping the wrestling program?
Yeah.
Do you know, a lot of people asked that before the show even started. What can you tell us about why BYU dropped the wrestling program? You said it might have been Title IX. What can you tell us about that?
I think Title IX might have played a part in it. You know, it's always about money, and we're not a revenue sport, so cutting us is going to save them money. They could put more money into football or women's sports if they cut wrestling. They took our wrestling room away and turned it into women's athletic offices, and so I don't think they liked wrestling. I think we scared them. You know, when I fought in the UFC, you know, they put me in a color photograph on the cover of the Salt Lake Tribune of blood on the ground, and they got women saying, "I don't think it's becoming conduct for a BYU faculty member to turn God's children into hamburger." And I get called into the president's office, and he says that what I did is not what we're about, and I can't do it anymore. And I was like, okay, so I stayed and kept my job, and kept the health insurance for my kids. But what was the question?
Yeah. No, so maybe let's back up a tiny bit. Your brother's death preceded your competing in the UFC 9 matches. Do you want to just quickly tell everybody about what happened to your brother, why he was killed, how he was killed, what led up to his death, and then how you heard about it, and then how that led to you competing in the UFC 9?
Yeah, there's no motive proven at the trial. John DuPont murdered my brother, and this was January 26, 1996. And I'm in my office, and I get a call from my.
Wasn't it that he was threatening to leave and not work with John anymore?
Yeah, he said he was going to leave after the next Olympics, and he knew that if Dave left, everybody was going to leave because everybody was there for Dave, not John.
So
And
Dave by that time, Foxcatchers, whatever it was called, they were training what, Olympic athletes? Is that what it was?
Well, Dave was training for the next Olympics. He was going to represent Team Foxcatcher in the next Olympics.
Okay.
And he had brought in a whole bunch of guys onto the farm as workout partners, and they were training too. So everybody was training.
Did Dave ever call you and say, man, these guys are crazy? Did you ever warn Dave not to work with John DuPont? Like, what can you tell us about Dave's experience and why he even went to John DuPont after you had such a bad experience?
Well, I think he just saw a way to keep competing and survive financially, you know, feed his family. There was not a lot of opportunity for wrestlers to do that. And so that was one of the few places that you could do it. So he took the job. I told him, obviously I wouldn't have done it. That's why I left. But he wanted to get in there, and I don't know, just we separated after I left Stanford for Villanova. Dave stayed at Stanford, and then he went to Wisconsin, and so we weren't really training with each other. He was married, he had kids, I didn't, and he's living his life. What the reasons why he went and was willing to work for DuPont, I can't tell you, but uh, I told him I wouldn't do it if I was you, but you're an adult, you make your own decisions.
Yeah.
It's.
Well, I love the ESPN series 30 for 30 just generally, but I'll refer everyone to that documentary called The Prince of Pennsylvania, because it tells the story of just DuPont's craziness, including like I mentioned before, automatic weapons and cocaine and allegations of sexual impropriety, whether or not those are true. It's a really compelling documentary. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So do you want to go to the day you learned about you probably had no idea that your brother's life was in danger. Is that right?
No,
Yeah.
nobody did. I
Yeah.
mean, as weird as DuPont was, no one thought he would trade an 800-acre estate for an 8x10 cell, but he
Right.
did.
Yeah. So what happened? Tell us the day you found out about your brother's death.
Well, you can see this on that Fight Lore episode, Wrestling Demons. I'm at my office in BYU. I'm the head coach, and I get a phone call from my dad. He says, "Hey, Mark, I got some bad news for you." And I was like, "What is it?" He goes, "Jean DuPont pulled up to your brother's house, pulled out a gun, and shot him and killed him." And I lost it. And I started screaming and cursing. I'd probably cursed more than anybody in BYU history. And I went home and I saw this 48-hour standoff. DuPont had barricaded himself in his house and for 48 hours. And finally, the police turned the heat off, and he asked for permission to come out and turn it back on. And when he came out, they tackled him. And was tried, convicted, went to prison for 14 years, died in prison in 2010 or 2009. One of the
Did he
other.
die? Did he die of natural causes or something else?
COPD and emphysema. He was smoking 3 packs a day. That's what I heard.
So how did your Mormon faith in any way impact how you coped with the loss of your brother?
Yes. Yeah. I've really read the Book of Mormon like maybe 2 times or something. I don't know. I wanted to know, if I was going to see Dave again. Yeah. Like I said, I didn't take my religion that seriously. I was just, taking it in moderation. I never really. I mean, I defend it, but I wouldn't really. I never stopped drinking coffee. A friend of mine goes, "Mark, do you drink coffee?" Yeah, every day.
So you were a BYU athletic coach who drank coffee.
Yeah.
Okay, but the Mormon Church theology didn't really penetrate you in terms of helping you deal with your brother's death.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know.
Were you the type of Mormon that would like go to church on Sunday and bear your testimony kind of thing, or not really?
Yeah, I got up fast and testimony probably maybe like 7 times in my life,
Hmm.
over 30 years.
Not a lot.
I went to the temple 3 or 4 times over 30 years.
What was what was it like going through the temple for the first time for you? Taking out your
Weird,
do you want to
really
talk about
weird.
the experience of taking out your endowments?
Yeah, really weird. Those hats and the apron and oh, weird. Where I was like, what? This is definitely a cult.
So you're as a BYU coach, you're still you go through the temple and you feel like the
Mm,
church is a cult, but your employer is the Mormon Church. Is that right?
no, I'm kidding. But yeah, I like I said, I only went through the temple twice the entire time that I was at BYU. And one was to baptize my brother, and the other was to get my endowments.
So you had your brother you performed a baptism for the dead for your brother after he died in the Mormon temple?
Yes.
How was that a spiritual experience? And if so, what was that like?
Well, that was my very first time in a temple, and I was very reverent. And I thought it was a sacred place. You're being told this is heaven on earth, and you're going to learn all these things. And so I went in there with my eyes open and my mouth shut, and I just wanted to take it all in. And I was very reverent and very respectful of everything that went on in there.
And you came away from that experience thinking and feeling what?
Thinking and feeling that it's rooted in a lot more earthly materials and uh, physical um, ceremonies and stuff than I expected. I thought I was going to have a spiritual experience, and all I learned was, these handshakes and code words, and the it wasn't like, I wasn't blown away. It, I thought it was a really beautiful building, but I would stare at it for how they built those, like the the moldings and stuff, and I was like, wow, that's because I'm a carpenter too, so I was admiring the construction more than anything.
Did you hope that maybe you would be visited? Like when I went to the Mormon temple for the first time, I had been led to believe that like maybe one of the spirits of the dead people that I was being baptized for would come visit me and appear in front of me while I was doing their baptism for the dead. Was there any part of you that hoped your your brother's spirit might visit you while you were
Yes,
doing his work?
I yeah that yeah, and I think maybe that's why I went in there too, because I had some other members telling me that they went into the temple and they had like lost a baby when they were really young, and that baby had grown up and appeared to them in the temple. And I'm so you know gullible. I believed them, and so that's what I was expecting, or not expecting, but I was hoping I might have an experience like that. But of course, that I didn't.
So you didn't feel your brother's presence or anything like that.
No.
And was that disappointing for you or not so much or
Um, like I said, I didn't take religion that seriously, so I came out of it and I go, well, that's that. And I went home and I went back to the temple one more time to do some endowments with a friend of mine. I didn't really have much invested. And then I went to the temple here in Oregon a couple times. That's the only times I've been in an LDS temple.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'll make a joke here. Maybe it's because you were drinking coffee. Maybe that's why you didn't have that experience. I don't mean to. I don't mean to be making fun of a serious thing, but
I'm sure you're right.
yeah, your brother's like, I really want to visit. I really want to visit Mark, but he can't quit the coffee, so I'm not coming.
Yeah. I'm like, if you LDS leaders are so perceptive, how come you couldn't tell I didn't belong in here?
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, you must have believed it enough to want to try. So you say you didn't take Mormonism too seriously, but you took it seriously enough to get a temple recommend to go in and to baptize, to get baptized for your brother. So I mean, I think maybe you hoped or believed a little more than you might be letting on. Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll admit I defended Joseph Smith and the LDS Church all the way very strongly up until about 3 months ago or
Yeah.
2 months.
Yeah. Okay. So so your your
But
brother died.
because it requires so much from you, you
Yeah.
can't be perfect. And so you're constantly, being told, or by yourself that you're not living a good enough life. And so I thought, man, if I get too invested in this, I'm just gonna think I'm a piece of crap. So I'm not gonna worry about it too much.
So you never really gave Mormonism your full heart because you felt like you could never live up to the standards. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't know how anybody can. I mean,
Yeah.
it's impossible. I mean, they got like 140 things you got to do. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a lot. So how did you go from your brother's death to 4 months later? Tell tell those of us who don't know what Ultimate Fighting UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship is and how you got into that and how you got into that as a Mormon and as a BYU athletic coach, because that some of those things don't seem to totally fit
Yeah.
in some
Well,
people's.
that's why I say that my experience at BYU was outstanding because for some reason I get a phone call one day and it's this guy named Steve and he says, the greatest jiu-jitsu fight. He goes, this Mark Schultz, the Olympic wrestling champion? I go, yeah. He goes, the greatest jiu-jitsu fighter in the world is in town. Do you want to fight him? And I asked him, what are the rules? And he was trying to intimidate me. He goes, there are no rules. And I was like, really? There are no rules? Okay, so what's going to happen? I'm going to commit a homicide? I'm going to gouge his eyes out? I'm going to I just throw it out? I didn't know what to think, but I wasn't going to let anybody punk me. So I said, okay, meet me in the BYU wrestling room. I'll knock the shit out of him. And so we made a date, and I show up in the room, and it was Hickson Gracie. And he says, he, he says, Mark, when I fight, I punch and kick and elbow and knee. But today we're just going to do submission grappling until one of us taps out. So it wasn't anything like the guy on the phone said. He was just trying to intimidate. And so we went in the center of the room and we went for about 40 minutes and he tapped me twice in moves that I had never seen before. And after that, I found a student of his, a black belt student of his that was living in Provo at the time. He just moved there. His name was Pedro Sauer. And so I went to Pedro's club and I asked if I could sign up and take jujitsu from him. And so I started going to jujitsu. And then I combined the jujitsu with the wrestling and formed my own style. And then I get a call from Pedro Sauer, my instructor. He says, Dave Beneteau is either the national heavyweight champion of Canada in wrestling or the runner up. Is going to come down and train for UFC 9. And he wants to do jiu-jitsu with us and he wants to get some wrestling training. Would you be willing to wrestle with him? And I said, yeah. So he comes down. We wrestle for about 2 weeks. And the last day I'm wrestling him, I slam him, and he broke his hand. And I took him to the doctor, and the doctor says, if we put a cast on, obviously you can't fight. But if we open you up, put a plate in, join the two bones, and cover it up, you might be able to get away with it and cover it up, and you won't even know that you broke your hand. And so he said, put a plate in. So he put the plate in, and me and him, Dave and Pedro, we all went to Detroit for UFC 9. I was going to be his corner man. I thought he was going to get in trouble with that hand, so I was going to throw the towel in if he got in trouble. And at the press conference, we're sitting there, and somebody ratted Dave's out and said his hand was broken. And so the doctor came over to Dave and looked at his hand, and it was pretty bad. He had a big purple bump on there. And the doctor said, I'm not going to let you fight. Or maybe it was Myro, the promoter, Myro, said he wasn't going to let him fight. I know. But either way, he was out. He could no longer. And so my instructor, Pedro, he says to me, I know who Dave's fighting, and I could beat him. I think you can beat him too. So I went over to Bob Myrowitz, the promoter, and I said, what do you think about me taking Dave's place? And he said, and I quote, oh, that's a great idea. You're Olympic champion. When you lose, it'll be even better. So, why
Well,
you have to say that?
this reminds me, Mark, this reminds me of your high school wrestling career, because you don't just walk into a professional sport, with very minimal training or competition and actually win against a professional. And that's exactly kind of what you did. And it kind of reminds me of how you won the California High School State Championship, having never won a tournament before. What's up with that?
That's why I believe in God. One of the reasons I believe in God. But yeah, I didn't know. I actually feel like I had an advantage over the other fighters because I didn't just know wrestling. I knew wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I had combined the takedowns and the conditioning of wrestling with the submission holds of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And just because I know these sports doesn't mean I can't punch and kick either. I can punch and kick hard. So I felt like I had a huge advantage over my opponent. So that's why I went over to the promoter and asked him if he could let me take Dave's place. So he let.
Okay. So when you went to Detroit, you weren't planning on fighting.
No. I didn't bring anything with me. I brought a pair of shorts to just train with the Brazilians, but I didn't. That's all I brought.
And you had never competed in any UFC official competition before, ever?
No, but I did fight with my heavyweight. I had this heavyweight at BYU named Mike Bolster. And it's kind of ironic or coincidental. Bolster means to boost. And he would come in after I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was friends with an MMA fighter named Tank Abbott, and Tank Abbott came to BYU to train at BYU with me and the wrestling team. And before then, me and Mike would challenge me to fight him every day for 3 months. When we put gloves on, we took our shoes off, and then we just threw down. Anything goes. I mean, we didn't bite or eye gouge, but we punched and kicked and just whatever we had. And so I actually had quite a bit of experience doing that. but I had never competed in that.
And was UFC 9 like a tournament where you compete until you win the whole thing?
No, that was the first time they went to a bout card format the way it is now. But every other UFC before that, it was a tournament format, like 8-man tournament format. But that didn't really work because guys were getting hurt, and then people would take their place that didn't win anything. And I mean, one guy won a tournament; he only won one match the whole time. He didn't, and everybody else got hurt. And so it
Oh,
wasn't working.
okay. Because I was wondering why you didn't go on to a championship sort of thing, but that wasn't the format.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, Gary's really tough. He's fought all the toughest guys in the world, and he's really got a lot of guts, and he's really strong. Matter of fact, he fought Paul Herrera and knocked him out with a crucifix. And Paul was Tank Abbott's best friend and those two came to BYU to train with me and the BYU wrestlers. Paul was training with us, and then he met my future opponent in UFC 8 and got knocked out with a crucifix in one of the most brutal knockouts you'll ever see on the UFC.
Hmm. Okay. So again, the guy you beat, what was his name?
Gary Goodrich.
Okay, Gary Goodrich. And yeah, let's go ahead and plug another time this little documentary that is found on the UFC website. I just watched it. It's a 30-minute documentary. You can, I mean, we don't want to encourage people to do this, but you can literally join it, pay like $10 or whatever. It's discounted to a couple bucks. You can watch it and then quit if you want to. But the documentary is called Wrestling Demons, Mark Schultz's Ultimate Victory, and it's on UFCFightPass.com. And I think one of the things that came out of that documentary that I really enjoyed was that it was tied, it was tied to your brother's death and John DuPont, but it was also a form of closure in response to you having lost in 1988. Do I have that right? Anything you want to say about what that victory, that UFC victory meant for you in terms of your brother or the 1988 Olympics?
Yeah, you do got that right. I wanted to go out a winner. I was going to, if I had won in '88, I probably would have quit wrestling and never done anything again. But because I threw that last match, I gave up my one and only chance. At the time, I thought to go out a winner. So I didn't get a chance to do what I wanted, and so I just so fighting and winning in the UFC 9 allowed me to go out a winner. And my DuPont had murdered my brother, and I mean, he couldn't have done any more to damage me psychologically and make me miserable than what he did. I mean, it ruins my motivation to compete. Then he kills my brother. So when I went in the UFC 9 and won and came out a winner, it allowed me to go out a winner, and I became happy again, and it gave me my happiness back, and it was a miracle. Just the way all the things that had to happen to fall into place to make that happen, it was pretty miraculous. I've had so many miracles, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So you referenced this before, but let's have it be in the chronology. What was it like to have a BYU coach get national recognition as a UFC fighter? It's kind of a brutal, violent sport. Did you get in trouble? Did you get called on the carpet? Did your job get threatened? Did you have to talk to your bishop? What happened when you got back?
Yes, the first thing that happened was they put a color picture of me on top of my opponent on the cover of the Salt Lake Tribune,
Yeah.
and that was, and then BYU, the universe, they created a cartoon, and they said the cartoon had 3 characters. The one it said the 1970s, and then it showed a picture of the Osmonds, and then they had the 1980s, and it showed a picture of Miss America, and then it said 1990s Ultimate Fighting Champion, and this little cartoon character is looking at his friend, and he goes, "At least it's better than the Osmonds, I guess," or something like that. I don't know, but anyway, then I got called on the carpet by the new BYU president, Merrill Bateman. He had just been made new president, and this guy is a hatchet man. He's cutting programs left and right, and pissed a lot of people off. But he called me on the carpet and he told me, "What you did by fighting in the UFC was not what we're about here at BYU. And you can still keep your job as a wrestling coach, but you can't keep fighting. Or you can keep fighting and you can quit your job." And back then, the only way you got paid was if you won. So if I was going to give up my job for a career in fighting, I would have to win every time. And the money was not that big back then. I mean, I won $50,000 that night, but uh, I it just and the UFC was constantly in trouble in court. They were being called human cockfighting and excessive brutality. They were trying to shut it down or keep it off pay-per-view, and so the promoters were having a difficult time making money until Dana White bought it, and then added a bunch of rules to to protect the fighters, and then get the boxing commission, I think in Nevada, to sanction it and then get it on pay-per-view. And now it's a huge sport. But back then it was just like the primordial days of the UFC. Now they're wearing gloves. I didn't wear any gloves. You could kick him in the nuts. You could grab his fish hook his mouth. You could pull his ears off, break his fingers. There's all kinds of stuff you could do.
That's violent, man. That's super violent.
It is.
Yeah. Well, so what'd you think of Merrill Bateman and in your conversation with him?
Well, it was very short. He just said, "Look, these are your options. Make your choice." And I chose to stay at BYU to keep my health insurance because I had 3 kids that needed health insurance.
Yeah. Did you marry your wife in the temple? Was she
No,
Mormon? Did you marry her in the temple?
she got baptized, but she was not active after that.
Okay. Okay, and you were raising your kids in Provo, Utah.
Yes, and then in Linden, Utah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you stayed at BYU another 5 or so years. And anything else you want to say about your time coaching at BYU before we talk about what came after? Let me ask you this. Did the church ever, how like in the church news or on the church website or whatever, the church likes to celebrate and use its celebrities for PR reasons, whether it's the Osmonds or David Archuleta or Steve Young, Sean Bradley, Ty Detmer, like any chance the Mormon church can get, just like Scientology, they want to put its celebrities up front. Even Peter Vidmar, want to put its celebrities up front to help improve the image of the church. Did the Mormon church ever sort of celebrate you, put you forward, put you on the cover of the church news, try and use you for their positive PR?
No, I don't think I was the type that they wanted to promote or be associated with. I was too much of a Neanderthal. I think that's what they thought.
Well, did that make you feel sad? Did that make you feel bad?
I didn't care. I didn't care.
Okay. All right. Well, so So do you want to talk about finding out that the program was canceled and how you found out and what that was like?
Yeah, I was in the wrestling room with my team, and the athletic director came up with the guy who was like the assistant, two of his assistant athletic directors came up with him. So the three of them are standing there in front of us, and we're sitting on the benches, and he tells us that they're cutting the wrestling program, and this will be our last year. And I just couldn't believe it because our athletic director was an All-American wrestler, and I just never thought in a million years. Plus, I had like done some research on Joseph Smith and his wrestling career, and I actually submitted his name to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame to be inducted as an outstanding American. Thank God he never got in. God, I would have
Wait,
been
you
a
submitted
laughing
Joseph Smith's name to be admitted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame? Did I get that right?
Yeah, the National Wrestling Hall of Fame has a category called Outstanding Americans. And basically, it's a category reserved for people that are outstanding Americans, known in their fields and known as wrestlers. Doesn't matter if they're good or not. It's just they're known as wrestlers, but they're public figures or celebrities or something. And that's made the National Wrestling Hall of Fame banquet a lot more interesting. And back when they added that category, and that's the category I submitted Joseph's name. But I recently just he never got inducted, and I told uh, Leroy Smith, the executive director, to take Joseph out of that out of contention for um, that induction. And it was based primarily on the fact that he built the largest city in Illinois. It wasn't based on his religion. The religion, though, I think is probably what kept him out of it. That's why he never got in it.
So he didn't get in, and now you're glad.
Yeah.
Okay. He
Thank
did that
God.
leg pulling thing, right? Isn't that what he did? Some type of stick pulling kind of thing?
Well, back then it was the pioneer style of wrestling. They called it catch as catch can, and what they did was they drew a circle in the dirt, and the object was to throw your opponent out of the circle and off of his feet. It was a little bit like sumo, I guess. I've never done it or seen it done, but that's what I read. Some of the literature.
At the time, did learning about Joseph Smith stick pulling or whatever, did it make you feel closer to Joseph Smith? Like you both were kind of wrestlers?
Yeah, kind of, sort of, kind of. But the difference is. Did I ever tell you? Oh, this. You want? I'm gonna blow your mind. I've got a letter in the mail from what from it was written in the first person from my brother Dave. It's a 3-page letter. I've got it sitting in my file right behind me. And yeah, I found out later it was written by a member of the church in my ward. And uh, I don't know why he did this, but he wrote a 3-page letter in the first person, in the voice of my brother, talking to me about what life is like in the afterlife. And he's telling me he met Gordon B. Hinckley and Joseph Smith, has a great love for others. And all this. I'm thinking, wait a minute. This is a 3-page letter from my brother on the other side. My brother's dead. This guy, he sends me this letter. The return envelope has got your brother on the return address. No, nothing else. And I read it, and part of the letter says, Joseph really was a good wrestler or a great wrestler or something like that. He could have given you and I a decent go. I've met Joseph. I don't know. You want me to read it? I can get it. It's right behind me.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I'm just kind of blown away. While you're grabbing the letter, let me just make sure I understand. You're saying that a member of your ward forged a letter from your dead brother as if he was your dead brother, writing you as if your dead brother was writing you from heaven to tell you about his experiences in heaven with God and Jesus. Is that what you're
That's right.
saying?
That's right.
And was he trying to fool you into believing more seriously in heaven? Was it a joke? Like, why would a Mormon member of your ward forge a letter on behalf of your dead brother and send it to you? What would his motives have been?
Look, this is it. 3-page letter from my brother, written in the first person, and you know, there's a lot of references to LDS stuff in this letter, and I finally found out who the person was. I'm not going to say their name, but I don't want to embarrass them. But I don't know why he would do something like. Maybe he thought I was mourning my brother's death. I don't know what he was thinking, but
Now go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read the letter.
it says, okay, my dear brother Mark, I have been trying to reach out to you for some time now. I think that you have been under the pressure of so much anger, pain, and frustration that you have not been able to feel or sense my attempts to reach you. Look, brother, you need to know something about me. I am in a place that I cannot even begin to describe to you in earthly terms because it is magnificent beyond anything that you've ever seen. When I first arrived here, I was completely overwhelmed by the incredible combination of visual and sensory beauty. Some of our brothers and sisters that have had the responsibility to, quote, return, you call them near death experiences, have attempted to describe what it is like here, but I can tell you this, there is no way to describe it. Let me sum this place up by saying there is really no reason to fear death at all. Someday soon you will know for yourself what I'm talking about. Those things that you have learned in the LDS church are true. Well, most of them anyway, because people on earth have some crazy ideas sometimes. In fact, Joseph really was a prophet. I have met him, and he is a great guy with an incredible love for others. There have been literally thousands of prophets down through the ages of man. Some have been recorded in earthly literature, and some were simply prophets in their own dispensation or period of time. Funny thing about time, it may seem like a long time since you have seen me, but really, it was only moments ago that John put an end to my earthly life. More about that in a moment. Pardon the play on words. And yes, most religions have very true elements. It was Father's plan that there would be many philosophical paths, as it is impossible for any earthly religion to contain all truth at one time on the earth. That is why the teachers or prophets within the LDS Church have talked about the quote, fullness of the gospel, and have not used the terms quote, complete or quote, all of the truth. I tell you, Mark, it is a testament to Father's love for his children that elements of his truth are scattered throughout the earth. Gordon really understands this principle well. You know, Gordon B. Hinckley, your prior church president. And he and I have spoken about you and the difficult path that you have been called to walk in life. By the way, those stories you have probably read about Joseph's physical prowess are also true. He could have given you and I a decent go on the mat. That's how I knew it's fake.
Hey,
Now,
say that again.
you want me from the letter or from what I said?
Just that last part that made you know that it was fake.
He said, Joseph could have given you and I a decent go on the mat.
And that was your competitive nature said no way, right?
It's reality. There's no way some frontier guy is going to beat an Olympic champion wrestler, and not even close.
And your brother probably, your brother would have known that more than anyone. So there's no way your dead brother would have told you after meeting dead Joseph Smith that dead Joseph Smith could have beat you in wrestling.
That was the only thing about this letter that I had a question about, because the rest of the letter, I didn't. It wasn't until I left the church that I knew this letter was fake. He goes, now, you want me to keep reading?
Okay, yeah, I do. Keep reading. Yeah, keep reading.
Okay, now about us. First, I want you to know that you have nothing to worry about with regards to me. I am surrounded by the most incredible brothers and sisters, and the emotional state of being here is so love-filled that there is not anything earthly that in any way compares to being here. So I want to request something really difficult from you. I want you to let go of me. No, I do not want you to forget me, but I want you to know that you do not need to, quote, keep my memory alive, because I am eternal. You got that? I am forever, and my memory will never diminish because I am only increasing. I want you to begin today to live for today and for yourself. Mark, you are beautiful. I love you with every part of my heavenly self, and Father loves you. And this is the incredible part, Mark. Jesus, our Savior brother, he loves you so very much. He has a special place in his heart for you because he feels that you remind him of his apostle Peter. He sometimes smiles when Jesus refers to you as one of his, quote, sons of thunder. And you are already forgiven for your sins. Forgiveness is the most indescribable experience, Mark. When I first arrived and had my life review, there were so many things that I had forgotten that I was ashamed of, especially when it related to you, Mom, Dad, and my precious wife and children. Yet when the Savior met me and reached out and touched my cheek, the shame faded away in an instant, and I felt this love. Love is the only earthly word that comes close to describing the feelings that completely purged all my feelings of guilt and shame. Now I only feel happiness, joy, and peace beyond anything you can understand during your earthly life. Mark, one of the greatest joys is watching other brothers and sisters arrive, meet their families, have their life reviews, you call it judgment, and then have their moments with Jesus. Every time I witness another person touched by the Savior, I experience the same incredible joy all over again. What you call the atonement really does complete until we come home and spend time with the Savior. That is when we know how magnificent it all truly turns out. And you should see the atheists and non believers. It is especially joy filled to see their expressions of surprise and gratitude as so many live out their lives on earth so at a loss for faith and hope. There are a couple things that I would like you to know. First, thank you for being such a beautiful man in the midst of so much sorrow. You can now let go of the sorrow. I have forgiven John and Mark. He was more sick and twisted than you or I could even imagine. He has been healed now, and I love him as my brother. And I know that may seem hard to believe because you would like to see him punished for what he did to me, to Nancy, Danny, Alex, and to you. What I want you to know is that he suffered in ways that you and I cannot even understand. When you get over here, you will instantly begin to understand what I am alluding to. But for now, please take my word for it. Someday you will forgive John too, but you will need Jesus' help to pull it off. Trust me on that one. Second, I know that you were stronger than me, even though I like to make you think otherwise. There are some things that an older brother that just does not want to let go of, but that is part of why you are still there and I am here. Father knew that you would be strong enough to walk the difficult path that you have endured. Now, Father, Jesus, Gordon, and our relatives that are here with me, we all want you to live for your future. Study the scripture that Jesus left in Luke chapter 9, verse 62. And Jesus said unto him, no man, having put his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. Stop focusing on what has already happened, brother. You need to be the best father and grandfather to your children and mine. They need the man you are today. They do not have me. They have you, and they need you to step up. And as long as you are looking back at me, they do not have you. Trust in this message. It has come through an earthly man who could sit at a terminal and type this letter for me. I am working through him to deliver a message in the only way you will receive it. Finally, thank you for reaching out to me with your message about your gospel. I want you to know that I have learned and accepted all of it. I hate to say it because you will think I am acting like your bossy big brother again, but from where I am now, I actually know a few things, actually a lot of things, that you do not know about the gospel or Father's love as we describe it here. Your time seems long, but it is literally just moments in eternity. Your apostle, Neil Maxwell, said it several times when he was with you. There are no clocks in eternity. And it is true, my beautiful baby brother. You and I, we are forever, and the power of grace and forgiveness cannot be fully appreciated until you are here experiencing it for yourself. I want you to quit worrying about who makes it and who does not get in. You will be happy to find out that Father plans on seeing all of us back here with Him and our Savior. That is what is so very, very cool about Father's plan. It is the truth. It is Father's love. And I promise you, Marky, He loves you completely so, so much. I love you, brother. So until you join me, get off that sore, beat up, bruised backside of yours. I could use another set of vocabulary that we both know, but it does not seem fitting here. And get busy living the rest of your life and be happy for Father's sake and mine. Love, earthly big brother, Davy.
Oh my
That's it.
gosh. Oh my gosh. I have so many questions I want to ask. But Mark, I think the first question I want to ask is, I guess this is a two-part question. Number one is, how did that letter make you feel? And then the second part is, did you believe it, that it came from your brother? And then I've got a bunch more questions. So first of all, how did it make you feel?
Well, I was skeptical. I don't believe anything unless, I have something to back it up. And so I had never I read it to a lot of my friends and family members and stuff and asked them for their opinion. And I never really formed an opinion about whether it was a hoax or not until I left the church.
Okay, so
And
yeah, we'll come back to that. But so you were kind of ambivalent about whether or not you were going to believe that letter was from your brother or not. You were skeptical, but you were open. Is that fair to say?
yeah, I guess.
Wow. Okay. And then how did it make you feel when you read it? Were you happy? Were you sad? Were you confused? How
It
did
was
you feel?
confusing because I didn't know whether it was a hoax or genuine.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it was true, I guess part of you would want to believe that your brother
Yes,
was alive and was reaching out to you, right?
absolutely. I mean, the I he flatters me in the letter. He says, "Here's the amazing part, Mark. Jesus himself has a special place in his heart for just you." I'm like, well, that makes sense because I'm Mark Schultz, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, but that's how he's appealing to me through flattery, and that's how Joseph appealed to a lot of people. Flattery will get you everywhere. And
Yeah.
I just didn't really. I mean, how could a 3-page letter come to me from heaven? I mean, if I was going to receive something from heaven, it might have been one word shouted out from the ceiling, or maybe an appearance of somebody for 1 second. Not a 3-page letter with 5,000 words. But
Yeah.
I did hope it kind of was true. I mean, in my fictional mind, I didn't give it much thought. I didn't take it that serious.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I was going to say, there's a funny comment from one of our viewers or listeners. Leston Buell writes, does this count as pseudepigrapha? And I know you're relatively new to kind of studying Mormon church truth claims, but the term pseudepigrapha.
I know it. I know pseudepigrapha.
Okay, yeah. So it's
Like
basically
automatic writing.
Well, no, it's basically somebody writing as if they're a historical figure who is dead,
Oh,
or who is in the past, because it gives the letter more, or the scripture more credibility. So some say that
okay.
Joseph Smith wrote the Richard Bushman, Mormon's Joseph Smith scholar Richard Bushman is basically on record saying that when Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Abraham, maybe it was an example of pseudepigrapha. Joseph had things to say, but if he just said it, it wouldn't be as meaningful. So he wrote the things he wanted to say as if he were Abraham, claimed that he translated the papyrus, and in that way people would pay more attention, and give more credence to what they had to say. This guy, maybe he wanted, I mean, it seems like he was worried about your testimony. It seems like he was worried about your faith. And so he figured if he wrote in the name of your brother, as if he were your brother, maybe you would believe more what he wanted you to think and feel and believe. And in that sense, it was pseudepigrapha. What do you think about that?
It's a complicated subject because the guy that did this, I'm sure, had the best intentions, but doing something like this is actually a malicious act. Lying is a malicious act.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrific. Like it's super dishonest, and it's super manipulative. And it's just really weird that a believing Mormon would for religious motivations lie in such an offensive and manipulative way. It's hard to wrap my brain around because he had religious motives, right?
Yeah, and I think he also had motive of wanting to associate with me for some because uh, I'm I think there's a group of people out there that my best friend is he has a lot of connections in the NFL, and there's a group of people out there he calls jock sniffers, and what they do is they do anything they can just to have any contact with any great athlete that they can have contact with, and I think that might have been a part of possibly part of his motivation. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I I don't know.
I mean, did you ever, I guess at the time, did you ever tell anyone that you got this letter? And
Yeah.
would you have told this guy who wrote the letter, not knowing that he had wrote it, would you have told him that you received this letter?
Actually, what happened was I went to church with the intention of trying to find the person that wrote it. And I put it in my pocket. I went to church, and the first person I ran into goes, "Hey, Mark, how's it going? I can't talk to you right now. I'm going to deliver a message to the stake president." I said, "Oh, really? Well, it's funny you talk about delivering a message because I just received a message and I pulled it out of my pocket and I read the one paragraph that said, 'Trust in this message, for it has come to you through an earthly man who could sit at a terminal and write this for me. I'm using him to get a message to you, and the only way you will receive it.'" And then I said, "I'll let you read the whole letter after sacrament." And so we went to sacrament, and then I let him read it in the basketball gym. And he took a really long time. And then at the end of it, he goes, "Let's go outside." So we went outside, and he goes, "Mark, I was running the other day, and I wasn't thinking about you or anything. And then all of a sudden, I received this revelation or this prompting, and I knew I had to go home and write this letter. So I did. I sent it to you. I deleted it off my computer because I knew it was only for you. I'm the guy that wrote the letter." And I'm like, what are the chances the very first guy I run into is the guy I'm looking for? So I was like looking up at heaven going, "Oh my God, this is like another, amazing coincidence. And, I've always say coincidence is how God talks to us, on earth. So I'm thinking this is a coincidence. And then I started to get to know him. And I went out and had lunch with him a couple of times. And he's a really nice guy. He's just, I think he's been indoctrinated too much. Just I don't know.
I mean, so you kind of knew who it probably was.
No, no, not until he admitted it. I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
I tried to find out who it was a couple times, and
Oh,
I had some, yeah, and a couple people in church were helping me, and I asked the bishop and a couple other people, and but yeah, when I went looking for the guy, to really to look when I went looking for the guy that I didn't I wasn't trying to determine who it was. I was trying to look for the guy that did it, and then I found him. The very first guy I met was the guy that did it.
yeah. So I guess, do you believe that he believed he was truly channeling your brother through revelation? I mean, because the Mormon that believes in Joseph Smith and, you know, the peepstones in a hat and the Book of Abraham, catalyst theory or whatever, could just as easily believe that he had the power to channel revelation. A lot of people are making jokes, asking if his name was Chad Daybell. You know,
No,
like, do you think this guy was just lying to you, or do you think he believed he was channeling your brother when he wrote the letter?
I can't speak to the. I can't get inside the mind of another person.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Okay. So when he told you he
What
wrote,
year it was sent? 2015,
okay,
August 7th.
so that was 7 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, so when he told you he had done it, what did you think and feel when you found out who had written the letter?
I questioned him. I asked him, "You remember this part, this part, this part?" And he said, "Well, I kind of remember this a little bit, not that much, and it's kind of all a blur."
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's a fascinating story. Thanks for sharing it.
You bet.
Okay. So your time at BYU ended what year?
2000.
Okay. So what did you do for the next 20 years professionally once you stopped coaching at BYU?
Well, I was thrown into a terrible divorce and custody battle for years, and I lost almost everything I ever worked for. And then I became an estimator at USA Masonry, a masonry contracting company. And then uh, I moved to Fresno, and we were managing apartments. And then I moved to Oregon, and oh yeah, I made the movie and I wrote the book, and I started doing seminars. Just
So I guess you left Utah around what year did you leave Utah?
I'd say 2004, maybe. I don't know. Is the justice system in Utah is totally anti-male. They treated me like dog shit, and I couldn't deal with it. I was being alienated from my kids. I was being robbed by lawyers, and I just said, you know what? I'll come back later, and I left. I had to get away from them, or they were going to keep persecuting me.
Mm,
No, that's what I did.
okay. And so it would have been, I guess, so you had various jobs and then you ended up deciding to write your memoir. I'm curious what led to the resurgence and what led to the movie, because not everybody's life is featured in a movie that includes Mark Ruffalo, Channing Tatum, or Tatum Chan I don't Channing Tatum, and freaking Steve Carell. So how do you explain? Well, tell us about writing your book and then tell us about the movie anything you want to say about it? Kind of what led to the resurgence in interest, 20 years later after your brother died?
Yeah, I wrote that book in about 2 weeks, right in 1996. As soon as I got back from the UFC, and
Oh,
I didn't do anything with it except uh, sell my life rights to different people that would try to get it produced. And it took 18 years from the time I wrote it to the time that it was turned into a movie and a New York Times bestseller. So, it wasn't like I was, it, it, what was the question again? I forgot.
well, okay. So if you wrote the book, right after you won the UFC championship in what, 1996? Is that right?
That's right.
But the book didn't come out till 2014 or 15,
Right.
uh, around the same time that the Hollywood movie came out.
Right.
Uh, why did it take so long for the book to come out and the movie to come out?
We just couldn't find anybody that wanted to turn it into a movie or publish the book. But once the movie was made, publishers, Penguin Books, the biggest publisher in the world, came out and wanted to publish it.
Okay, so the movie got made, and the success of the movie made a publisher want to publish your book. Is that right?
Correct. That's right.
Okay. And what was the, like, there's a photo of you that we included in the thumbnail of you and Mark Ruffalo and Channing Tatum and Steve Carell all in a photo. I can pull that up. But what was it like to have after kind of fading into obscurity, after leaving BYU and Utah, after having your life and divorces, after having kind of things go south, what was it like all of a sudden 10 or 20 years later to like have a movie be made about you and your brother, and then also to have a book end up on the New York Times? That's kind of like probably many dark years followed by some incredible highs. What was that like?
Yeah, it making that movie was not that great. Don't I don't really like that movie. I don't like the story is changed too much. The director changed my story. My story exists in my New York Times bestseller. He took my story and changed it into his story, and you can't really follow it. That doesn't make any sense. But I did like the fact that People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive played me because, of course, that's the only person they could find. But other than that, I didn't like it. But it did serve as a platform to get word out about my autobiography. A lot of people think my book Foxcatcher is a true crime. It's not. It's my autobiography. And I have people all the time going, Mark's all about me, me, me. I'm like, it's my autobiography.
Yeah, that's dumb criticism. I think I read somewhere that your late brother Dave's wife, like, approved the movie or something to that effect. Is that true? Not true?
Yeah, she said it was very close to the truth. She became friends with the director. I became enemies.
Yeah.
I mean, I attacked him viciously on Twitter.
But I guess there was a sense that you were ambivalent, that about the movie, that in some ways you liked it, but in some ways you didn't. And even that you were excited about the movie up until it was released. And even after, And so I'm imagining that you were happy the movie was being made, happy that the story was being, given some sunlight, but then just maybe frustrated with how you all got portrayed. Is that
Yeah,
how
I
would
mean, this was my first time to, do anything like this. So I had no experience and I trusted the wrong people. And it was a mixed bag, it was great that Channing Tatum was playing me, but it was terrible that I had this director that was so, intent on disrespecting and demeaning me. And I just, I thought, well, it was, it's hard for me to explain because it's such a mixed bag.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so what was the reception on your book? And what was that like? Like few people, holy moly, Mark, you've got an Olympic gold medal, several world wrestling championships, a UFC victory, a movie made about you, and then a New York Times bestseller. Like you're a super hyper achiever, brother. What was that like to have a New York Times bestseller?
Oh, I loved it. I was it lifted my story up to a higher status, which is where I wanted it to be. And it not only is it a New York Times bestseller, but it's an Amazon editor's pick, which means they've read it, they like it, and it's also the best-selling amateur wrestling book on Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. And did you like do a book tour where you traveled around and went to bookstores and signed copies of the book and met readers of the book and all that stuff?
Yeah, I did that for a little while when the book and the movie was first released, and but then the 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 that doesn't last forever, and people they move on, and that's but it was great, to the problem with nobody reads anymore, so everybody's watching movies, they're watching this fight lore episode, but nobody's reading my book, and just because people don't read like they used to. And uh, so when I would go give like a speech somewhere, I'd ask the audience, how many of you have seen the movie? And half the hands go up. How many have read the book? One, two hands might go up.
Oh, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Was there an audio version of the book or was it just a print
Yeah,
version of the book?
there's an audio version, too.
Did you read the audio? Did you
Yeah.
narrate the audio?
N-
Audio?
no, I'm not
Nice.
the narrator.
Okay. Okay. Well, so you don't have to answer this question, but I feel like I want to ask it. Were you able to receive any monetary compensation either for the movie or did you make any decent money on the book
I
or
did.
like I misunderstood with the Olympics, those two types of things that you would think lead to fame and fortune, a Hollywood movie and a New York Times bestseller, did they leave you in the same financial state you were before?
No, I made a lot of money on selling my life rights, my film life rights. I carved out my literary rights and kept those for myself, and then I sold them to Penguin. But I made a lot of money selling my film rights to Annapurna and my literary rights to Penguin.
Okay, well, that makes me happy for your life that you finally, because I imagine you were struggling financially, between your BYU years and 2014 and 2015.
Yes, tremendously. You wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, what the justice system did to me it's a crime. They kicked me out of my house. No possessions, just out onto the street.
Mm,
It's amazing what you can do.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that 2014, 2015 happened. Like, makes me happy.
Yeah.
So during all that time, from leaving BYU till even after the movie and the book, what was your relationship with the church? Did you go inactive? Did you stay faithful for all that time?
I stayed faithful. I went to church, I'd say maybe half the time, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And
I'd just go myself. I just
what's
thought I
that?
should. I just went myself. I didn't bring anybody with me. I just did it just because being around other people is better than being alone. I, the social aspect of the church is a benefit, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So so was there a big letdown after the movie and the book happened where you had to come back down to earth and just become a normal citizen again? Or were you able to
No,
or were you able to parlay the book and the movie into kind of a new type of career or set of careers?
yeah, I mean, it, yeah, I don't know. The book and the movie, and it was separate, you know, but it did bring in some money, it allowed me some freedom and some time, and it, and it gave me a lot of publicity. Some of it I didn't like, but some of it I did, and a lot of people when I got to know what other people really thought about the movie, I didn't sweat it so much. People call and hey, I saw the movie, it's great. I'm like, oh, I'm glad you like it. I don't really like it, but I'm glad you do. And I just I just quit sweating about it and just realized, you know, that people don't really care about anything that's going on in the world. All they really care about is what's going on between their ears. That's their world. So if they're not living in my world, it doesn't really affect them. They don't
Mm,
affect me.
okay. So what did you end up doing career-wise between 2015 and now? What'd you do for career?
I would do wrestling camps, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu camps. Um, I'd do like uh, corporate speaking engagements. There's a speech on, if you type in Mark Schultz speech, you'll come up with this speech I did in, I think, around 2015 or something. It was on, it's the only one I've managed to capture on film. But I spoke for Kepler speakers for a while. And um, yeah, that's, uh, that's, that's what I did.
Okay. Well, let's just so as of a few months ago, you were still a believing, devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? Should we talk about
That's right.
how in the world Mark Schultz lost his faith in 2022?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you.
Okay.
I have a friend, my best friend actually, who will remain nameless, but he got the West Nile virus and he had a near death experience and he went to the void and scared the hell out of him. And when he got out, he read the Bible like crazy. And I had always been thinking, I hope he comes back to the church because his whole family is members, and you know he's got a lots of generations going back as members. And I thought he needs to get back into the church. Well, he comes back from the void, and all he reads is the Bible. And finally, one day, I just asked him, "Why don't you read the Book of Mormon?" And he said, "Why?" I go, "Well, it's scripture, right? Like the Bible." He goes, "Yeah, but it's not true." And that floored me.
Now, was that this year? Was that this year in 2022?
Yeah, about 3 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. So wait, prior to 3 months ago, had you ever heard of the CES letter? Had you ever heard of Mormon Stories podcast? Had you ever heard of any of the problems with church history? And if so, how did you deal with it before 3 months ago when you heard about problems with Joseph Smith of the church?
Well, I didn't. I vaguely recognized you, but I knew you were anti-Mormon, so I didn't think I could. I don't know. I should listen to you or anything. Or I never heard of the CES letters. I never heard of any problems with the scriptures, the Book of Abraham, the Kinderhook plates, Fawn Brody, View of the Hebrews. No man knows my history. The First War, Napoleon.
Like I just have to say, I am stunned that you're like an international athlete celebrity. You're an intelligent guy, and it's 2022, and in all of your, and you've been Mormon since 1991.
That's right.
And in all that time, the Mormon Church was able to enculturate you in a way where you would have never heard about CES letter, Joseph Smith's polygamy and polyandry, like the Book of Abraham problems, the CES letter, any of the problematic podcasts out there. I am stunned that you were in such a bubble that through mid 2022, you had no exposure to the criticisms of the Mormon Church's truth claims. I'm stunned.
Yeah. Well, I had no reason to question their truth claims. I was, fat, dumb, and happy. I didn't look for, anything behind the curtain. I like the Wizard of Oz curtain. I just had no reason to search for anything like that. But when my best friend told me that the church has a doctrine that says unless you get married in an LDS temple, you lose your kids in the afterlife. And I was stunned when he told me that. I was like, this can't be true. He goes, yeah, it is. And I searched for it. I found D&C 132 and I read it meticulously and consumed it very carefully. And I saw the dark side of that doctrine. And I was out like that.
Okay, so you're saying reading Doctrine and Covenants, section 132, which Mormons like to refer to as the New and Everlasting Covenant. I like to refer to it as Joseph Smith's polygamy revelation that he published years after he had already started practicing polygamy. You're saying Mormon scripture, actually reading Mormon scripture, caused you to lose your faith in Mormonism.
That's right. I read it very carefully. I saw the dark side of it, and I could not believe it. It was
this is going to sound ridiculous, but what's not to love about D&C 132?
Well, you know this better than anybody.
What's that?
You know this better than anybody.
Well, for those who've never been Mormon, who haven't listened to our multiple episodes on D&C 132, including with Mike of LDS Discussions and including those with Sandra Tanner, I'll ask Maven to include those in the show notes. But can you share anything that you found particularly offensive or repugnant about D&C 132?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you don't get married in an LDS temple, not only do you lose the kids that God gave you on this earth, no matter how much you love them and how much they love you, you're going into eternity as a single ministering servant angel, never to increase, never to get married, never to have a family, and serve those who have been sealed in LDS temples. That makes no sense.
And I guess having been threatened with estrangement from your own kids in the US legal system, I imagine that is probably going to touch your heartstrings in a particularly forceful way. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. I even went in front of my entire church, and I you know what? I started asking around in my church. I'm like, how can you guys believe this? Look at what it says. And you know what my answer was? You know what the answer I got most of all? Don't worry about it. And some people even told me, oh, you're not being sealed to your spouse in the temple. You're being sealed to Jesus. Like, I never heard that. My best friend who's been a member his whole life's never heard that. Are you just making shit up?
So I have to ask, like, did it bother you that Jesus, Mormon Jesus, was threatening to kill Emma if she didn't let Joseph have extra wives? Did that bother you at all?
No, that I could accept.
Well, what the? Wait a minute. Are you joking? I hope you're joking.
I'm kidding.
Okay. Did that bother you, or the fact that Joseph was told that he could marry as many virgins? That Mormon Jesus told Joseph Smith that he could marry as many virgins as he wanted to? Did that bother you?
Well, that no, the thing that bothered me was losing your kids and becoming a servant, ministering angel to
Yeah.
these idiots that go through the temple. These guys are going to be my superiors in some stratified form of heaven in the afterlife, simply because they went into some building and it said some words and wore some clothes. There's no way that's happening.
Well, you are literally the first ex-Mormon I've ever talked to who wasn't bothered by the actual polygamy in D&C 132, but instead were bothered by, I guess, the model of heaven in the afterlife. This is a first for me.
No, I think polygamy. There's nothing wrong with polygamy. Not if consenting adults can get married of the same sex, why can't consenting adults marry whoever they want? Why not? What's wrong with polygamy? What the problem with polygamy is Joseph Smith going after 14-year-olds when he's 37.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I agree that
And
that's
marrying other men's wives. That's not polygamy. That's polyandry.
Say that again.
That's not polygamy. That's polyandry, marrying other men's wives.
Okay, so you don't like that Joseph Smith married 14-year-olds and teenage girls, and you don't like that he married other men's wives. That's a problem for you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. But to take a beautiful 14-year-old girl and violate her, and you're 37 years old, that needs that cannot exist.
And Mark, I don't want to, argue or challenge you really, because that's not my style. I do want to say, for me, there's a structural problem with D&C 132. It's not so much the problem is, let consenting adults do whatever consenting adults do. It's the fact that it's Mormon polygamy is structured. So even though Joseph was able to do polyandry sort of probably as a ruse or a cover up to allow him to take on these wives, but have the cover of them being married to other men, there's a structural problem for me with D&C 132 because it's only the men that are allowed to have multiple wives. There's nothing in the D&C 132 or in the Mormon church's practice of polygamy that allowed one woman to have multiple husbands. So structurally, it was unequal in that sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you're right. I did have a problem with the Mormon Jesus destroying Emma for not accepting the polygamy doctrine, the eternal marriage doctrine, and Joseph, taking on all these other wives, 20 other wives before he even told her about polygamy.
Right. And what about just the structural problem of there being inequality, that the men can have multiple wives, but the wives can't have multiple men? Is that a problem for you?
Well, they can have multiple men as long as one of them's Joseph, right? Isn't that the deal?
Right, but I'm saying the way D&C 132 is written, it says nothing about a woman being able to have multiple husbands, and that's unfair, right?
Yeah, it's right. What uh DNC okay. Yeah, that is a problem. It didn't bother me as much as the other problems, but
No,
it is a
I mean,
problem.
it bothered it bothered you for the reasons it bothered you. I'm just saying there are a couple people who are saying, hey, don't be insulting to the wives of Brigham Young. Don't be mean. Calling out their appearance. So
Well, okay, I'm going to refer to Mark Twain. You know about him?
I mean, I know who Mark Twain is. Did he make a comment about the appearance of we?
Yes.
I mean, I think
Google
we.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're saying Mark Twain made a comment about the
Yes.
appearance of Brigham Young's wives. Okay.
I thought that was a famous quote. I thought I was just parroting a famous quote.
There's a lot I don't know. So I
Okay.
love that you're teaching me
I
something.
don't mean to disrespect the women, but um, I didn't. Well,
You were making the point that it's predatory for an older Mormon prophet to prey on young teenage girls. I think that was
yeah,
the main point you were trying to make.
yeah, and this whole thing about equality of whatever. I just when beauty comes in, when factors in to that whole equation, it changes the equation completely.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of hear what you're saying. So it sounds like you didn't stop with D&C 132. You started studying other stuff. So can you talk about kind of what resources you found to teach you about other issues? And could you spend, for those of us, for those who are listening who are Orthodox Mormon that don't know about what's in the CES letter or elsewhere, or who don't know the problems about the church, or for the non-Mormons that have never heard about any of this stuff and are just like, hey, I like Mark Schultz, let's learn about his Mormon experience. Can you tell about where you learned about the major problems with Mormon church history and truth claims? And can you spend some time talking about some of the other things you learned outside of D&C 132 and why they were a problem for you?
Yeah, DNC 132 was just the starting point for me.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been on a quest, every day pretty much since like 3 months ago, looking for more and more information. I after 132, I I just started searching the internet, and I found No Man Knows My History by Fawn Brody, and I read that.
You read
And
No Man Knows My History?
yes,
What'd you think? What'd you learn?
I learned Joseph's full of shit.
Like, were there a couple stories from the book that stood out for you? That kind of,
Well, uh, gosh, I don't know. The Book of Abraham, the Kinderhook plates, D&C 84. If the Bible, saying that if a prophet makes a prophecy and he it doesn't come true, that means he's not a prophet. D&C 84 prophesied, Joseph prophesied the New Jerusalem temple would be built before the end of the generation, and it wasn't. And then Kinderhook plates, Joseph's made a fool, and there was an Egyptian dictionary or something that Joseph claimed. Somebody brought something into a room that Joseph proclaimed this was an Egyptian dictionary, language dictionary, and it was actually a psalter, whatever that is, PSA, and he just got up and walked out. He didn't defend his declaration that this was an Egyptian language. And the Book of Abraham was really the big one for me. That there's no getting out of that. And if that is because we know now that the Book of Abraham is pure fiction, that means he's not a translator. And if he's not a translator, like he claimed, and he can't be a prophet, seer, or revelator like he claimed either. And I started looking at him, and I got digging into his scrying, the when he got when he was convicted for glass looking, scrying.
When he was treasure hunting with the stone in the hat.
Yes, and then even the gospel topic essays that the LDS Church put out. You know, those was it 13 answers to 13 questions or something, and they gloss over the whole Book of Abraham papyrus thing. They because because there's controversy among Egyptologists. We're still not certain about what this means. Yeah, we are. We are certain. We know exactly what it means. It's wrong. It's fiction. Joseph Smith made it up, especially facsimile 3. And Joseph references facsimile 3 in the Book of Abraham, tying those two together. And he tries to translate the Egyptian hieroglyphs above Osiris, and he says this means this, but it doesn't, which means he has no gift of translation. It means he's making it all up.
And I just have to say, for only being sort of for only having learned about 3 months ago, or decided 3 months ago, that there are problems with the church, the fact that you're like quoting facsimile 3 and the Kinderhook plates only being a few months into your faith crisis, I guess maybe shows a lot about maybe your personality, but also maybe about how important this finding was to you and how serious you take it.
I think I am just one more cog in a huge machine that is going to take down the church. Not right away, but it's going to affect a lot, because we're in the information age. I couldn't have done this in 1991 when I joined the church. So much was kept from me. So much of the church's history was kept from me. I met Gordon B. Hinckley. I talked with Hugh Nibley a long time about issues that I had with the church. And anyway, I think because the information age, that of course, but they have $100 billion instant peak fund, so they're not hurting financially, and they've got all that real estate, so they're not hurting at all. And anytime you get a group of people together, regardless of why they get together, let's say they're getting together because they all believe in some fiction. The fact that there's so many of them gives them a lot of power, and that people like that. They like joining something bigger than them, being part of something bigger than themselves. I can see why people would stay in the church, knowing it's based on a foundation that's full of lies.
And did you contemplate sort of, this is something you referenced a little bit earlier, but do you think you would have joined the church? I guess I have a couple questions. Do you think you would have joined the church back in 1991 if the missionaries had given you all the facts about Joseph Smith back then?
Absolutely not. No, I don't think anybody would join if they knew the truth about Joseph Smith and the church, and how they cover up and omit. They lie by omission mainly, and they don't teach the missionaries what any of the real history, and there's no way I would have joined. I don't think I would have anyway. Maybe I would have. No, I don't think so.
So, how did it make you feel to realize that you had joined the Mormon church based on false pretenses?
Well, I never really took the religion that seriously, so I wasn't really that hurt that bad. But and plus my experience at BYU wasn't. I mean, it was a good experience, and the church is paying me. I'm not paying them. Everybody else, they're paying the church tithing. I'm paying tithing too, but they're paying me a lot more. So giving up 10% of what they're paying me, part of the deal, at least in my mind, was. And so it was a different experience for me than for, your average, whatever member. Finding out it was all false. Actually, it was kind of a relief. It was like as soon as I knew that it was all BS, it was like the yoke just lifted off my shoulders, and it's like I'm free. I feel like free now.
Okay, so are you saying that over the past 3 months, your reaction hasn't been like anger at the church? It's
No.
more you feel liberated and free?
Yes.
What do you feel liberated and free from?
Because I used to believe that you had to do all these things to get to heaven, and now I know you don't. Now I know that it has no effect on my eternal salvation.
So, Mark, if it's okay, I'm hearing two conflicting things. I'm hearing, and by the way, you're like, you're texting me and you're emailing me, and like I can tell you're taking this really seriously, and that's how we ended up on this podcast together. But the two conflicting things that I'm hearing are, I never really believed that much. I never really took it seriously. But then you're like studying it voraciously and texting me and coming on the podcast, sort of like, with a lot of intensity about how it's not true, and that now you feel liberated and free. So how do we square, I guess what I feel like is you actually did care and did believe and did feel suffocated or controlled or harmed by the church, and you really feel relieved to be free of it. But I don't want to put in your mouth. I don't want to put words in your mouth,
Finding out that I had been lied to was an injury.
Mm-hmm.
But being hurt like that, like, eliminated any guilt I felt for leaving. I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm done with this. And I don't know what two things. I don't understand what two things you're seeing that are conflicting.
Well, first of all, this isn't me like saying I don't believe you. This comes from a respectful place. But there's a part of your narrative that you've shared in your story, and just sometimes we don't even understand our own thoughts and feelings. This is kind of maybe the psychologist in me coming out a little bit. On the one hand, you've said a lot during today's episode. I never fully believed it. I never fully bought in. I joined for the job. But on the other hand, you stayed active for a very long time. And when you found out it wasn't true, you felt deceived, and you also felt relieved by the burden of your beliefs. And so there's a bit of parallel messages about you never took it seriously and never totally believed, but you were mad that you were deceived, and you felt real relieved that you no longer believed it anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, humans are complicated. You're a psychologist. You know how complicated psychology can be.
Yeah. So so it's not me doubting you. It's just me wanting to ask you, how you reflect upon, those contrasting kind of narratives that you've got within your own brain. It sounds like you were kind of compartmentalized. You never took it too seriously, but maybe on some level you really did take it seriously. Maybe on some level you really did care and really did believe. Is that possible?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, look, I guess, I don't know, whatever mood I'm in, if I feel like I'm good, argue with somebody over whether the church is true or not, I'll fight them to the death. If I'm, if I'm, tired, I don't care. Do whatever you want. But I go up and down. We all go up and down. So, yeah, I could see how you could see those two sides in my mind or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought I'd come on here to make sure any potential investigators have informed consent before they decide to join.
Absolutely. No, I'm not like, I love your story and I love your courage and I love your passion and I love your integrity. So many people, are on, even after they lose their faith completely, especially if they're public figures, they're terrified to ever like speak openly and publicly. And so I have deep respect that you're willing to do it now, because the, without, wanting to harm the church directly, the deception and the deception continues, right? There's still people joining the church without all the information, and there's still people in the church who don't have any idea. And so the only way people become aware so that they can make an informed decision is if courageous people like you speak up. And then when somebody who has public notoriety, like Tyler Glenn did, like Mindy Gledhill did, like a few courageous people have, Wayne Sermon, Benji Schwimmer, occasionally a high profile Mormon loses their faith. And instead of just going away quiet, they're willing to speak up. And I see it as one of the most courageous and important things somebody can do in your situation. So I have deep respect for you for your willingness to tell this story.
Oh, well, thank you. I I have deep respect for you that you're getting the truth out there that people don't really have. They're not getting it from any other place except people like you at RFN. Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson really affected me when he showed me that 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 display of all the books that contained chiasmus. That blew my mind. I'd never thought I'd ever see another book with that much chiasmus in it. And when I found that, it pretty much blew me out of the water. I mean, I had nothing to hold on to anymore.
Yeah, we'll make sure and share a link to the Chris Johnson video about chiasmus. I spoke to Radio Free Mormon this morning, and Radio Free Mormon is following right now on the chat. So we have to
RFM.
We have to give a shout out to RFM, because everybody knows that RFM is the king. The podcast.
Yeah, he's a really entertaining guy. It's funny.
He is. He's a great guy. We love you, RFM. Okay, so yeah, your chiasm pillar falls along with the Book of Abraham and the Kindred plates and Joseph and the translation and all that. Now there are still some Mormons, let's just say like Richard Bushman or Terrell and Fiona Givens or Patrick Mason or others, who say, well, maybe maybe the Book of Abraham wasn't a translation, and maybe the Mormon church isn't the only one true church, but it's still a good way to live. It's still a good place to find community. You can still follow Jesus in the Mormon church. So, let's just say, okay, we don't believe a lot about what the Mormon church teaches, but we can still have it be the place where we worship and follow Christ. What's kept you from going that route and just being kind of a progressive liberal Christian Mormon? Because a lot of people are choosing that route. What keeps you from choosing that route?
You mean, why don't I join another religious organization?
No. Why don't you just stay as a Mormon and just be a Christian, but within the Mormon church, like a lot of, intellectual, scholarly, progressive Mormons are doing these days?
Because I don't believe it.
Okay. I mean, that's brilliant and beautiful and simple. But a lot of people say they don't know about Joseph Smith, but they can still worship and follow Jesus as a Mormon. But what do you think about that?
I can't follow the Mormon Jesus because the Mormon Jesus is very different than the biblical Jesus. The Mormon Jesus, I mean, what does he do? He'll destroy Emma Smith for not accepting polygamy. He's and I'm still I have to admit I do not know a lot of things. One of the things I don't know is Jesus Christ, did he really rise from the dead and pay for our sins? I want to believe that, and but I don't know. I don't have the evidence to base it off of yet. I'm still searching for that. But there's no way I could be a member of the Mormon church now because the Book of Abraham, everything. It's almost everything you look at. Everything. Every time Joseph Smith opened his mouth, lies came out. How are you going to be this is the prophet of the restoration of the Church of Jesus Christ? This makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I don't know if you feel this way, and I don't even know if what I'm about to say is going to make sense to you. But just like you went from warp speed to, starting your wrestling career in high school to winning the California State Wrestling Championship, just like you went from never being a UFC fighter to winning a UFC match in light speed, I have to tell you that you have gone typical Mark Schultz fashion. You've gone light speed from starting to have the idea that you are going to question the Mormon church's truth claims to like 3 years later, to 3 months later, being able to rifle off the number of issues that you've been able to internalize and absorb. So on the one hand, I want to just say, in typical Mark Schultz fashion, you're going at light speed in your processing of the problems with Mormon church truth claims. And there's also some viewers and listeners that are saying you're still a baby in your process because, it's very early. By any other standard, this is still very new to you and a lot to absorb, given that you've been a Mormon for over 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fool myself into, thinking that I can just leave religion like that it's so full of indoctrinations and come away, unfazed. I'm sure there's issues that I have with this, but there's no going back. That's for sure. And uh, I attack the problem like I attack everything 100%. Once I believe something's true, that's all I need. And that's the great thing about the truth. All if the Joseph Smith says the Book of Mormon is the most correct book on earth, you don't need much evidence to prove it's false. All you need is one contradiction, mistake, error, anything that doesn't make sense, and you can just throw the whole thing in the trash. And I don't need to know every single thing that's wrong with the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, and the Book of Abraham, the Doctrine and Covenants. All I need is one or two things, and I've got way more than that. But
what is it that you've learned that demonstrates the Book of Mormon to not be true? Just tell us really quickly a few things you've learned, because you haven't really mentioned problems with the Book of Mormon yet. What are a few things you've learned about the Book of Mormon that have led you to believe that it's not true?
Well, Joseph has no gift of translation. The witnesses never saw the plates. The plates never existed. Joseph never even needed the plates to exist in order to write it. There were competing, or no, not competing, I should say. There were similar books existing around the same time and place as Joseph Smith that are very similar to stories in the Book of Mormon. His father, Joseph Smith Sr., told him the story about his dream. He turned into the tree of life and the iron rod, Lehi, and yeah, it's all just plagiarized and filled in with fiction. And he speaks in kind of like when Mark Twain said, he's got this sort of folksy country way of speaking, but then he has to throw in a couple of King James Version Bible quotes to give it that that feeling or that sound that this is scripture, the way. And I think and also the paintings and stuff that the church, like Arnold Freeberg, he's got these paintings of pictures of Joseph sitting at some table looking at these gold plates, got his finger on the gold plates. That never happened. The witnesses that saw the gold plates left the church, all of them, every single one.
Yeah.
And Joseph's sitting here bragging about how he can keep any church together better than anybody in history, including Jesus Christ. But he didn't. Everybody was fleeing him at the end. After he started screwing all those women, William Law, it's like, this ain't happening. Nauvoo expositor, Joseph decides to send the Danites in to burn the Nauvoo expositor. And Governor Ford has them arrested and ends up in Carthage. And he killed 2 people before he died. He wasn't martyred. He's not like, letting, like Jesus letting him die. Like Jesus is letting the Romans crucify him. He's fighting for his life. He's shooting 2 people, killing 3. And he's giving them the masonry signs to try to, it's like, oh Lord my God, is there no mercy for the widow's son? He's trying to use the Mason signs to stay alive. He's not giving up. He's fighting for his life.
He's not quite an innocent lamb to the slaughter like we were taught.
No.
Yeah.
And everything has been set up for the benefit of Joseph Smith, so he can get more rich, more powerful without doing any hard labor like his dad did. he admits he hated hard labor, hated working the farm. And he figured out a way to, buck the system. And I got to hand it to him. The guy, built Nauvoo, and that's biggest city in Illinois. It's, I've never done that, but the way he did it was so. I mean, I could have done it in 1830, but not in today's, internet age. But
you didn't mention like anachronisms in the Book of Mormon or DNA. Were those a part of your deconstruction?
Yes, absolutely. Elephants, wheat,
tell.
barley, dogs, chickens, horses, steel. None of that stuff existed in pre-Columbian America, and they're in the Book of Mormon.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, every time you turn around, there's some problem with something Joseph said or did or wrote.
Yeah.
It's an avalanche of lies.
Man, Mark, you've really done your homework. I'm super impressed.
Well, that's, the way I approach everything,
Yeah. All right. So you've touched on this, but so have you told anybody before now? Did you reach out to anyone that you really cared about who is still in the church to tell them you no longer believe? And if so, what's been the reaction of people who you've told you no longer believe?
I've told a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter, a lot of people, and a lot of my wrestlers will come on there and argue with me, and I'll tell them, look, I love you guys, but this, you want to keep giving your 10% of your income to a tax-free corporation, it's got $100 billion in the Ensign Peak Fund, go ahead. But, I don't trust them with my money. And anyway, I forgot the question. What was it?
Yeah. So what are the people who are in the church, who are still in the church, who still believe, who you've told you no longer believe, what's their reaction been, and how have they treated you?
Well, I'm the only member of my family, and I baptized my son, but he's getting out, and I sent him Mark Nagel's letter to send in and get out, and that's really the only person, because I don't have any family members to tell. I go to church alone. And now I don't even go to church, at least not the Mormon church. But I as soon as I realized that I was done, I haven't had any contact. Well, I had one contact with one guy. I told him I left, and he was accepting of it, I guess. He didn't ask me why. I don't think he wants to know, because he'll probably. But I understand that. I saw myself doing that, when I was a member. I haven't told many people that are in the church that are like my former, ward members or anything. I haven't said anything. There's no reason. My home teacher, he called me and he said, "Hey, Mark, your name's not on the records anymore. Did you move your name to a different ward or something in California?" And I told him I did, because I didn't want to hurt his feelings, because he was such a good guy.
Well, people are going to find out now. You may be contacted. You may be contacted by some people after this interview? I'm
The
guessing.
Danites.
No, just people who are surprised, or people you may find former, BYU wrestlers that you coached who have left the church and who are going to say, "Me too," or former colleagues or former ward members. You may have a lot of
Yes,
them.
I have found several that have left the church.
Yeah,
I'm not going to name names, but yeah,
yeah,
it's the people that I relate to, and I think like the most. Those they left the church. My best friend left the church.
yeah, yeah. Well, somebody asked how you removed your records. You used Quit Mormon with Mark Noggle, right? To resign from the.
Yeah, I didn't move them. I quit. I had my name taken off the records.
How did you do that?
I just filled out the form with the one Mark Noggle provides, and got it notarized and sent it to the address that was on the letter.
Okay, and you found that at Quit Mormon, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So really quickly, you've alluded to this, but I know you still have a belief in God and you're exploring a belief in Jesus. Do you want to talk about why God, Jesus, and the New Testament are still important to you, and if you've even tried
You
to
know
attend
what?
other Christian
You,
churches?
you know what I would like to know? I know I'll never find out now, but I'm a big fan of Robert Rittner and Dr. Robert Rittner, the Egyptologist. And I would like to know what he thinks about Jesus or God, because there's a very similar story about the god Horus, and there's these born on the same day as Jesus, rose from the dead after 3 days, went against the 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 establishment, and I I'm still searching that, but I wish I really liked Robert Rittner. God, he was so great in that. Matter of fact, it was on your show that I really fell in love with that guy. He's a cool guy. Somebody that dedicated his life to Egyptology, and he's so certain. He's so forceful, and he just there's no room for error in his. Whereas he talks about guys like John Gee and Muhlestein. I understand those guys, though. I mean, they're just trying to hang on to their jobs till they retire. They're just, I understand that mentality.
Yeah. You are an example of someone that defended the church in part because your job depended on it, right?
Yeah, my job really didn't depend on defending the church. It depended on being able to live in that culture with, in peace, and, having a stable life. I mean, imagine what would happen to Guy and Muhlestein if they all of a sudden just started telling the truth. Who was the guy that left? There was a guy, I just read about him last night. He's not B.H. Roberts, but the guy that left, and he changed completely from apologist to accepting Dan Vogel's view of the Book of Abraham. Do you remember
Oh
that?
yeah, that's Brian Hauglid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That to me, his story is kind of a classic sort of example of timing. He stayed in it long enough to get his retirement, and then as soon as he got retirement, he revealed the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, Grant Palmer. I don't know if you've run into the name Grant Palmer yet, but he's the same basic thing. He was a CES director, seminary and institute teacher, and once he knew he could retire with his pension, that's when he started feeling comfortable opening up about his loss of faith.
Yes.
Yeah.
I,
You can't really fault people for protecting their pension when they've given their lives, to the church.
Yeah, especially, those who were born into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea that we're baptizing 8-year-olds or making them feel that they're at the age of accountability at 8 is ridiculous. The prefrontal cortex isn't even formed till you're 25.
Yeah.
These guys they're get up and say, I know the church is true. That's child abuse, in my opinion. Well, especially knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
Back then, I thought, look at how cute that kid is, or whatever.
Yeah. So in terms of still wanting to believe in a God and in Jesus and an afterlife, it sounds like you're still trying to make sense of those things. But you do have a disposition to want to still believe in God and Jesus, correct?
Well, yes, because I've had so many miracles happen for me in my life. I cannot deny the existence of miracles. If not God, then at least miracles. And if there's miracles, then maybe there is a God. And I think there is. I just can't imagine. I don't know. It's just the way. I mean, the moon, the moon and the sun are the same size, going around the Earth, and they block each other out once in a while. What are the chances that those two objects would be the exact same size in the exact same orbit, but only from the position of standing on this Earth? That's pretty remarkable, I think. Maybe there's something special about the Earth. Maybe this is, a place where a sacred ground for where we're going to learn or be tested or whatever. I mean, I had a very my brother, when my brother was 4 years old, he was playing with my dad at a playground, and my brother said, "Dad, you want to hear a big secret?" And my dad goes, "Sure, what is it?" He goes, "You won't laugh at me, will you?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Okay, before I was born, I was standing in the clouds and I was looking down on the earth, and I was surrounded by 12 men. And the oldest one pointed down to the earth and said, 'You're going to go down there to be tested.'" And then my brother ran away and played in some jungle gym or something. And my dad's kind of stunned, and he's sitting there going, "Did that kid just say what I thought he said?" And he runs over to Dave and he goes, "Dave, I have to know, um, did you pass the test?" And Dave said, "Yeah, I passed, but I'm not going to be here very long." And he was killed at the age of 36. I don't know. I just, I don't put, look at all the near death experiences they have on YouTube.
Yeah.
I tend to believe that we're gonna live. Einstein said you can't destroy or create energy. So where's our human spirit, our consciousness gonna go? That's energy. It's not gonna be destroyed when our body dies. Or, I mean, do you think that's gonna happen?
I mean, I hope that I do hope that there's an afterlife. I do. If I can, I love living. And so if I can keep living after I die, I love it. So I hope that there's an afterlife. I absolutely do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And I bet you hope you can see your brother again someday, right?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, absolutely. I want to be with the people that I love love me forever, hopefully. I
Yeah.
mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So you would have joined the church before your brother died. So I'm curious really quickly, I didn't ask you this. What did your dad and brother or anyone else in your family say when you joined the church? And then was your dad able to say anything now that you've left it?
Yeah, he kind of makes fun of me, like, you were so brainwashed, like, why you have to rub it in like that? But
What did your dad say when you joined?
um, not really much of anything. I tried to convert my brother. I brought him up to Temple Square. I brought him through, the whole tour thing, and I thought I would be able to convert him. And of course, I never did. His wife doesn't believe in God, but so I never did. And but I mean, if I'm willing to try to convert my brother, I believe. So, uh, but thank God he never joined. And see, I think God, there is a God, and that God protects me. And I think I've had a lot of strange experiences where, it just, all these things have to fall in place in order for, like the Fight Lore episode that just came out. The number of things that had to fall in place to create that was incredible. It's like beyond coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you saw it, you know. Um, anyway, that's how I left the church.
Yeah, and I will say your life has been miraculous in so many ways. So I understand why you still want to hold on to those beliefs, and many people do, and I respect it. So I respect you. Um, so Mark, as we're kind of wrapping up, um, what uh what are you doing now? And how can people follow you? What are you doing, and what do you want people to know about your life now?
Okay, if you want to follow me, I'm my name on Facebook is MS Grappling. My name on Twitter is Mark Schultz. That's my name with a Y at the end. And my name on Instagram is Mark P. Schultz. P is for Philip. So I do grappling seminars, wrestling camps. Um, uh, I make appearances, speeches, um, speaking engagements, um, that kind of stuff, martial arts instruction.
Okay, and you do that in Oregon, right?
I do it all over the country. I travel everywhere, all over the world.
Yeah. Really quickly, I'm going to read you just a couple quick comments. A guy named Shane Cunningham wrote, "I know you're laughing already. Do you know who Shane is?
Yeah.
Did you read the quote? Did you read the comment he's already made?
No. What's he
Oh,
say?
Shane writes, I know Mark from my associations with him in Southern Oregon and from my time when we were both in the same ward. He really tried hard to defend the faith. After my excommunication, I lost touch with him. I'm so looking forward to his story. Please tell him that Shane Cunningham says hello. I would definitely allow time for him to talk about how the profound loss of his brother Dave informed his conversion and belief. They had a deep connection, and Dave's death was so profound to Mark's journey." That's what Shane Cunningham has to say.
Okay, okay. I'm going to tell you something about Shane, but I'm not going to humiliate him in front of him or in front of anybody. But I will share one thing with you after we get off of
Okay.
the website.
Well, what's it like to hear from Shane now?
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish him the best. He's a good guy. Did he
Yeah.
say he was excommunicated?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. No, he's a good guy. He really is.
Yeah.
He's got a good heart.
Yeah. Okay. And then Nathan Arthur Peterson writes, I'm excited about this one. Mark was one of my heroes in high school. He was good friends with my high school coach and would come run wrestling clinics at my school. I loved going to the BYU wrestling matches and camps. I got a recruiting trip to BYU after my senior year, and it was a close second on my college list. I was so disappointed when BYU dropped the program while I was on my mission. I am really interested in this time at BYU and his interactions with the administration. I think we kind of covered that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Scott Brown wants to know if you're close with Rulon Gardner. That's Mormon wrestler Rulon Gardner. And if there's anything you want to say about Rulon.
Well, Rulon is Olympic champion. He's a Mormon, and he is the winner of what we call Miracle on the Mat, where he beat Alexander Karelin in the 2000 Olympics in the finals. And yeah, Rulon's a great man, you know. I recruited Rulon to come to BYU. He ended up going to Nebraska, which was better for him because we dropped the program. But I recruited Rulon to come and wrestle for me at BYU. And I really liked him a lot.
Do we know if he's still a believing member of the church? Do we even know?
I'm pretty sure he is.
Okay. All right. And then
maybe not.
Go ahead.
Maybe not after today. But
really quickly, one last comment. My friend Rebecca Peterson writes, my husband wanted me to tell you to say hello to Mark Schultz for him. He wrestled for Ben Ohio at in high school. That would help him make the connection. I don't know.
Yeah, Ben Ohio is a really good friend of mine. Okay. Yeah. I'll tell you something about Ben after we're off the
air. So we'll have the after show conversation.
Right.
All right, Mark. Well, just to close, like you've made a big announcement today. The Mormon Church was really important in your life, and now you found out it wasn't true for you, and so you're letting the world know. I guess I'll end with a two-part question. Do you regret having been Mormon? And you know, what are the final words you want to say to any believing or active Mormons, or even anybody investigating the Mormon Church? What are the final words you want to say? So do you regret having been Mormon? And what are your final words to anyone who's Mormon or investigating Mormonism?
I don't regret going to BYU and becoming the head wrestling coach and joining the Mormon Church, if that's what I had to do that. It wasn't a negative experience for me. It was a positive on a lot of it because of the non-Mormon members I met there, but also the Mormons that I met. I had a great group of kids, man. They were just really good kids. They were like the top academic school in the academic wrestling team in the nation 3 times. And I'm glad I got my master's degree, and I don't regret joining the church. The only thing that is wrong with what happened with me was they lied by omission to get me and keep me. And I don't blame anybody for that. I don't think the people that did that, you know, I know Alan Albright didn't lie to me, or not intentionally anyway. But I know the truth now, and I think I don't have any regrets about it. It's just the fact that I was lied to, that injured me, and that injury, the pain of that injury, made me feel good when I left.
Yeah. Well, Mark Schultz, it has been a real honor for me to have you reach out to hear about your story, and to be able to just have you be willing to come on Mormon Stories and share it. Things really, when somebody with power and influence is willing to be honest and open about their experiences, sometimes that really has a big impact on people's lives. And so I just want to thank you for your willingness to be open and honest and come on Mormon Stories and tell your story. It means the world.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of the truth. As much as it might hurt, I'd rather have it than not. And I think most people are like that. And that's why I'm here. I want you to know I appreciate what you do. And, Mike and Gerardo and RFM and all those guys that are getting the word out about the truth, the foundation, the history behind the Mormon church that nobody really knows about. If they did, they wouldn't join.
Yeah. Well, let me just plug a couple things. So your book is called Foxcatcher, The True Story of My Brother's Murder, John DuPont's Madness, and the Quest for Olympic Gold, published in 2014. Please check out Mark's book, and go to ufcfightpass.com, register, and you can watch a really cool documentary called Wrestling Demons, Mark Schultz Ultimate Victory, where he defeated Gary Goodridge in UFC 9. And please reach out to Mark on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, because he's always up for public speaking engagements and self-defense instruction. Mark Schultz, we honor you and we wish you the best, and we hope you'll reach out anytime. Let us return the favor, and we hope this isn't the last time that we hear from you, brother.
Well, thank you. It's an honor. I appreciate you too. I hope you come back someday.
All right, Mark. Take care, brother.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And thanks to everyone for joining us today on Mormon Stories. Please right now subscribe to our YouTube channel or click the alarm, or both. That will inform you every time a new episode is released, and it will help us with the algorithms. We have a goal to reach 100,000 YouTube subscribers. That will help the channel reach more people. So please become a YouTube subscriber today. Also, this podcast exists through listener and viewer support. So if any of you are in the position to donate to Mormon Stories podcast, you can go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. We're tax deductible in the U.S. We're transparent in our finances, and we are committed to promoting informed consent and transparency within Mormonism, and to support people like Mark who are experiencing a faith crisis. Also, Mormonism Live, if you are joining us in the live stream right now, Mormonism Live starts in like 15, 20 minutes. RFM and Bill Rule have a really important episode about automatic writing and Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. So please support Mormonism Live and Bill Reel and Radio Free Mormon, like all the other things that we encourage. And most importantly, just be good to each other, be kind to each other, and let's keep seeking truth. Like Mark said, truth matters. Let's keep following the truth wherever it leads. So thanks everyone so much, and we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Take care, everybody.